Chapter 1064. A disdainful sneer appeared on Granny Yan's face as she said, "Every time a divine splendor descends from the conferred God mountain in the extreme region of heaven bearing, it means that someone in the world has attained the qualifications to be conferred as a god. The 6 ancient gods should summon the corresponding person to the conferred God mountain and absorb the divine splendor that descends from the sky to rapidly increase their cultivation and consolidate their position as gods. However, the 6 ancient gods who control the conferred God mountain don't follow the arrangement of the Tao. Every time a powerful divine light descends, it means that the person who is conferred as a god will have extraordinary achievements in the future once he absorbs such a powerful divine light." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said with slight surprise, "Could it be that the 6 ancient gods are worried that someone will surpass them and do something to the divine light?" Songyun Xan and Ji Yu looked at each other in shock. They didn't expect to hear such a secret of the god realm. Just based on this secret, Songyun Xan felt that it was worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. Granny Yen snorted coldly. "One of the important reasons is that they are worried about being surpassed by the younger generation. What's more despicable is that they actually take the divine light for themselves. Every time a powerful divine light descends, the 6 ancient gods won't summon the person who is supposed to be conferred as a god to absorb the divine light that belongs to him. Instead, they quietly arrange for their descendants to come to the conferred God mountain to absorb the divine light and create an expert that belongs to their own tribe. *CK. They're really despicable." Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. His expression twitched as he clicked his tongue. It seems like there are bastards who abuse their power for personal gain everywhere. They take all the benefits that belong to others. What about others? Others? Whether others live or die is not something they consider at all. Granny Yen snorted and said with a sarcastic expression, "The 6 of them have already agreed that if the divine light belongs to one of their 6 tribes, then the other 5 tribes have no right to share it. If it doesn't belong to any one of the 6 tribes, then the 6 tribes will each choose one person from their tribe to come to the conferred God mountain to share the divine light. Of course, if the divine light is pitifully small, it won't be able to forge a divine body if it is shared by 6 disciples of the 6 tribes. Under such circumstances, the 6 ancient gods will find the corresponding person from the lower realm to absorb it. Damn it. No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. Are the 6 ancient gods really willing to give it up?" Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but mock. Granny Yin shook her head and said, "You just don't know. It's not that the 6 ancient gods want to give up, but if the divine essence is too little, it can only help one person forge a divine body. If the disciples of the 6 races share it, not only will they not be able to forge a divine body, but it will also harm them. This was because once you absorbed the divine essence, no matter how much you absorbed, you wouldn't be able to absorb any more even if you were given another chance. Usually, the amount of divine essence you absorb represents the level of your future achievements. Anyway, it won't pose any threat to the people of the lower realm even if they absorb it. Hence, under the situation where none of the 6 ancient gods wanted to let the other party take advantage of them, they gave the cultivators of the lower realm a chance to become a god. The most important thing is that although Tao doesn't care about what they are doing, it doesn't mean that Tao doesn't know what they are doing. The 6 ancient gods can't be too greedy. If they don't give any chance to the people of the lower realm, Tao might bring along the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god to deal with them one day. That would be more than enough for them to see. Although the 6 ancient gods have the advantage in numbers, I'm afraid that no one has the confidence to deal with that mysterious Tao, let alone the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "It's a pity that Tao created the rule of ascension for mortals, immortals and gods. It was originally a good intention to let everyone go their own way, but unfortunately, it was destroyed by the greed of a few people. I can't figure it out. Tao created this system, but why didn't he participate in it? He also didn't let the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan who are loyal to him participate in it. With the participation and supervision of these 2 clans, the 6 ancient gods wouldn't be so unscrupulous to this extent. Could it be that Tao has always been indifferent to it and didn't interfere in it?" Granny Yen pondered slightly and said, "I don't know why and no one can figure out why." Yu Qianqiu suddenly thought of something and said strangely, "According to this, it means that there should be some people in the lower realm who have reached the qualification to become a god but haven't ascended to the divine realm. But why have I never heard of these people? With their ability they should not be unknown people. Could it be that they have been killed by someone?" "That's not true." Speaking of those who were deprived of the opportunity to become a god, Granny Yen couldn't help but sigh and said, I heard from Ming that someone accidentally found a cultivation space in the Netherworld River in the Netherworld that the great god Coiling Dragon had opened. Although it was a space that had been abandoned for a long time, it was said that the great god Coiling Dragon had cultivated in it. For those who had no way to ascend to the divine realm, it was tantamount to finding the way to the divine realm. They treated it as a treasure land and gathered in it to cultivate, almost reluctant to come out. A cultivation space opened by the great god Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld River? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback and said. Xinyu, who was on the flying shuttle, also couldn't help but let out an ah. The two of them looked at each other and obviously guessed something. Gray Cloud Xian looked at the two of them in confusion. He didn't know why the two of them were so surprised. Granny Yen also glanced at the two of them and asked, "What's wrong? Do the two of you know that place too?" Yu Qianqiu looked at Xinyu again and guessed that the other party had the same guess as him. He then replied, "I heard that there is a mysterious place in the Netherworld River, and there are almost godlike experts in it. It is called the Netherworld Spirit Mansion. I wonder if it is the cultivation space abandoned by the great god Coiling Dragon that you mentioned, Granny? You really are a knowledgeable person. It seems that there is no secret in the lower realm that you don't know. I only knew about it from Ming." Granny Yen nodded with admiration and said, "That's right. The place that Ming mentioned was named the Netherworld Spirit Mansion, by the people who gathered there." Gray Cloud Xian took a deep breath and his face was full of shock. He didn't expect that there were so many godlike experts in the Netherworld. He felt that it was really worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. He actually knew such a big secret. If he brought this news back to the Passionless Palace, it would definitely be a great contribution. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. After thinking for a while, he changed the topic and asked, "So, did the demon god massacre the god realm because the divine essence that belonged to him was divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods? But that's not right. If it was divided, how could he ascend to the god realm and become a demon god? That's because the demon god Yi was too powerful." Granny Yin shook her head and sighed. "I only managed to figure out the whole story of that storm after I combined it with what little Shen's mother, Ming, had told me about the lower realm. It's a mistake to classify Ming as a peerless genius like Zheng and Yi. In fact, although Ming has the cultivation of an early-stage small god, he is still far from the level where he can be conferred as a god. In the lower realm, only Zheng and Yi can be called peerless geniuses. With their abilities even in the god realm, they are absolute masters and have long reached the level of being conferred as a god. But it's a pity that the two of them stayed in the lower realm and didn't know anything about the god realm. As their divine essence was too powerful, the divine essence that belonged to them had naturally been divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods. Zheng and Yi were originally friends. Their cultivation was rare in the world. Although the latter was a little stronger than the former, the difference was not too big. It's funny that the two of them didn't know anything about the god realm. They still appreciated each other and became good friends, working together to pursue the path to become a god. Later on, the two of them met Ming. Ming was a rare beauty in the world and her cultivation was also extraordinary. It made the two of them fall in love with Ming at first sight. And Ming was also amazed by their high cultivation and was very happy to become friends with them. As the saying goes, time breeds love. Not only did the two men fall in love with Ming, even Ming also developed feelings for Zheng. Naturally, the two of them got together. However, the two of them had scruples about Ye's feelings and had been secretly working together. On the surface, they maintained their previous relationship and were ready to find the right opportunity to tell Yi. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, since the cultivation of Yi is higher than that of Zheng, why did Ming choose Zheng and not Yi? I also asked Ming this question, but Ming said that it's because Ye's character is too clear about love and hate. If he likes something, then he likes it. If he doesn't like it, then he doesn't like it. It can even be described as extreme. In fact, Yi originally had a wife and a child. But after meeting Ming, Yi brazenly killed his wife in front of Ming to show his determination to Ming. Granny Yen smiled bitterly and said, "Ming was frightened at that time. I didn't expect Yi to be so cruel. Think about it, how could Ming be with Yi? If Yi falls in love with another woman in the future, wouldn't she follow in the footsteps of Ye's ex-wife? Lunatic." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself. He couldn't help but think of Bai Changchun, who abandoned his family and son. He wondered if all the real experts had similar tendencies. Granny Yen continued, "He didn't know about the other couple. He felt that it wasn't a good idea for the three of them to continue like this. There was only one Ming, and in the end she could only be with one man. So he secretly looked for Zheng, and proposed a solution. He asked for them to cultivate in seclusion together. Whoever obtained the qualification to ascend to godhood first would give up the competition for Ming. In the face of such a ridiculous method, Justice can completely reject it because Dark has already secretly cooperated with him. At the very least, Dark has the right to make her own choice. It's not up to the two men to gamble with her life. However, a person who could reach the level of Zheng was naturally a proud person. He didn't think that he was weaker than his opponent. In the end, he was provoked by Yi, and agreed to the bet with Yi behind Ming. Don't you think such a man is a fool? Chapter 1065. At that time the lower realm was actually very chaotic. In order to find a quiet place to cultivate, the two men joined hands and opened up a huge space with their powerful cultivation. It was a huge space that was not smaller than the immortal realm, which later became the demon realm. However, it was precisely because of the earth-shattering actions of the two bastards that the 6 ancient gods who looked down on the lower realm were alarmed and all their attention was focused on them. The 6 ancient gods didn't expect that there would be an expert who could open up a new world in the lower realm. They felt that if these two people were to be left alone, they would be a big trouble in the future. Hence, they decided to eradicate these two people. However, there was a bottom line set by Tao in the god realm that the 6 ancient gods didn't dare to trample on. Tao once said that if anyone from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm without permission, he would be destroyed and would never be able to reincarnate. Although no one from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm, it didn't mean that the 6 ancient gods didn't have any way to deal with it. Hence, they secretly contacted the rulers of the immortal realm and the underworld, as well as the god-level experts in the netherworld palace, who couldn't ascend to the god realm, and asked them to gather their forces to eradicate Zheng and Yi. Hence, a turmoil that affected the lower realm began. The devil path led by Yi, and the demon path led by Zheng, suddenly suffered a heavy blow from the immortal realm and the underworld. There were also the experts in the netherworld palace, who were eyeing them covetously. The 2 experts who led the monster path and demon path naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. They immediately launched a strong counterattack. Zheng handed over the command of the group of demons to Yi. Yi led the monster path and Zheng led the monster path and attacked the immortal realm and the underworld so hard that they couldn't fight back. Zheng and Ming guarded the exit of the netherworld palace. They beat the god-level experts inside so hard that they didn't dare to come out. This allowed Yi to quickly kill the immortal realm and the underworld without any worries. After dealing with the immortal realm and the netherworld, Night was preparing to completely eradicate the hidden danger in the netherworld palace, when the 6 great ancient gods of the god realm were furious. It was impossible for them to unify the lower realm and have a huge force that could fight against the god realm. Coincidentally, at this time, a divine light descended from the seal of God Mountain and 2 god positions appeared. The 6 great ancient gods immediately took this opportunity to send their god envoys to the lower realm, preparing to summon Yi and Zheng to the divine realm, and then slowly deal with them. Zheng and Yi didn't expect that they would suddenly have the opportunity to ascend to the god realm. Although they were happy, they were also worried about their gains and losses. There were only 2 places to ascend to the god realm, and Dark didn't have the chance. Neither of them could let go of Dark. After Ming found out about this, she didn't want the 2 of them to waste this rare opportunity because of her, so she persuaded the 2 of them to go to the divine world first and wait for her there. She said that she would definitely cultivate diligently and sooner or later, she would also ascend to the divine world. At that time, the 3 of them would meet again in the divine world. Who knew that at this time, the 2 men actually decided to give up the rare opportunity to ascend to the divine world and stay to accompany Dark. At this time, Zheng naturally didn't want to delay Night anymore, so he told her about his relationship with Dark. He said that it was he who should stay to accompany Dark, and asked Night to cherish this rare opportunity to go to the divine world. However, Night's character is very easy to go to extremes. After knowing the truth of the matter, he immediately flew into a rage. He thought that Zheng had secretly colluded with Dark to open up a new world with him and was playing with him. In his rage, Night brazenly attacked Zheng. Not to mention that Zheng was not a match for Dark at that time, Zheng also felt guilty and was not prepared for it. He was seriously injured on the spot. When the devil god is angry, no one can stop him. Then, Night brazenly killed Zheng, who was seriously injured, regardless of Dark's desperate attempts to stop him. Not only that, Night didn't let it go. He even stripped away Zheng's primordial spirit and annihilated it. He didn't even give Zheng a chance to be reincarnated. It can be seen how crazy Night's stubborn character is. He turned against a friend of many years just like that. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes that appeared in the sky in Lingfang Valley. Sure enough, it was filled with the smell of killing. But thinking of this, he couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. Since the devil god already had the strength to open up a space, in addition to that pair of cold and ruthless divine eyes that could lock on what happened in the human world at any time, he couldn't help but say doubtfully, "I've heard that there are almighty people who can open up a passage from one world to another at any time. Could it be that the devil god who could open up a space at that time still couldn't open up a passage to the divine realm?" Granny Yin shook her head and said, "Not only does Night have the ability to open up a passage to the divine realm, even Jing has the same ability. But it's not as easy as you think to open up a passage from one world to another. It's easy to open up a passage, but you don't know where the destination is. In other words, you don't even know where the divine realm is. So what's the use of opening up a passage at random? Can you step into the divine realm just by opening up a space passage? Who dares to rush in blindly without knowing where the end of the broken void is? If that's the case, you might sink into the endless void forever and be devoured by an inexplicable force. If you don't know the way, you won't be able to enter. No matter how much effort you put in, it's all for naught. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding and asked again, "What happened after that?" Gray Cloud, Xian and Shen Yu stood on the flying shuttle and listened attentively. Being fortunate enough to hear these words, not only did it increase their knowledge, it was also greatly beneficial to their future cultivation. Granny Yen raised her hand and touched Taishu Zheng's tombstone with a sigh. After Zheng was killed, Ming collected his corpse and threatened to Night to take revenge on him. Night was still angry and immediately kidnapped her, wanting to bring Ming to the divine realm. He wanted the two of them to be together forever, saying that no one could take anything away from him. The messenger from the divine realm didn't expect such a thing to happen. He didn't expect that the two targets he wanted to eliminate would actually kill each other. One of them died so easily. After the shock, not only did he not get angry, but he happily took care of both of them and brought them to the divine realm. After arriving at the divine realm, Night found that the divine realm wasn't as beautiful as he imagined. The entire divine realm was obviously the exclusive land of the ancient gods. As an outsider, he didn't have much power and was even ostracized on the way to the god-sealing mountain. Especially when he heard the secret ridicule from the descendants of the 6 great clans, only then did he understand that he and Jing should have ascended to the god realm a long time ago, and the divine splendor that belonged to the two of them had long been divided by the others. Now what was given to him was what was left of the others. Night and Ming were chased into the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. Looking at the two divine splendors that fell from the sky, although they were beautiful and dazzling, they were two thin rays. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and loosen the restriction on Ming. Two former friends but now enemies faced each other alone in the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. One of them cursed angrily, while the other shook his head and smiled bitterly. At that time, Ming had the idea of committing suicide, so she spoke incoherently. She actually said that she was pregnant with Zheng's flesh and blood. As expected, Night was enraged and was restrained by Night once again. However, Night didn't kill her. He only whispered in her ear that if he didn't guess wrongly, once the two of them absorbed the 2 beams of divine essence, they would definitely be persecuted after going through this process. To Ming's surprise, Night brought her under the 2 rays of divine splendor and used the heaven-defying demonic reversal technique to help Ming absorb the 2 rays of divine splendor into her body. After that, Night told Ming that if you really hate me that much, then you should live well and save your life to take revenge on me. Ming didn't understand what Night meant when Night slapped her stomach and killed the fetus in her stomach. Night said to the grief-stricken Ming again, "I'm sorry. I had no choice but to do this. I didn't have the confidence to escape with you. Only by letting them know that you and I are complete opposites can you have a chance to live. Remember, if you want to take revenge for Zheng and the dead fetus in your stomach, then you must live well." When they heard this, all of them were moved and couldn't help but look at each other. The demonic god Night was neither good nor evil. It was hard to tell if he was a good person or a bad person. It even made the 3 of them feel suffocated. Night really escaped from the sealed God's forbidden land? Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask. If he didn't escape, how could the current demonic god exist? Granny Yan nodded indifferently and said, indeed, he single-handedly fought his way out of the sealed God's forbidden land and escaped. The guards outside the forbidden land didn't expect to encounter such a ferocious desperado. However, at that time, Knight's cultivation was not high enough to move unhindered in the immortal world. Immediately, there were countless experts who chased after him. One can well imagine what happened to him. Although he killed many of those who chased after him, he was forced to break all 4 of his limbs along the way. He had to use the blood escape art 4 times before he was able to escape. It could be said to be extremely tragic. Those who saw it with their own eyes were all shocked. Later on, when they recalled it, they would still be moved. However, his ability was indeed extraordinary. I can't help but admire him. So many people couldn't stop him and he escaped in the end. After that, the 6 clans led by the 6 ancient gods almost searched the entire divine world, but they couldn't find his hiding place. They also didn't know where he was hiding. Fortunately, under his ruthless actions he made the right bet. Ming really managed to keep her life. Chapter 1066. Actually, there's another important reason why I was able to stay alive. It's because Night made too much noise and attracted the attention of the Dragon Tribe and the Phoenix Tribe. The people of the 6 tribes didn't do anything to her because they were afraid of her. They even gave her the title of God of the Underworld. But it's impossible for her to be treated well. Not only did she not get a territory, she didn't even get a place to live. Granny Yin turned around and pointed at the grave on the other side. Although my old man has been conferred the title of Moon God, he's actually not well received in the tribe. Ming was randomly assigned to stay here with me and my wife, and he'll suffer the disdain of others together with us. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and said, you are also from the 6 tribes of the realm of gods? Yes. We are the descendants of the ancient god of light. When Granny Yin said this, a sarcastic expression flashed across her face. It seemed that she didn't want to have too much to do with that tribe. She changed the topic and continued, after Dark came here, we were all ignored and looked down upon. Maybe it's because we share the same fate, we got along very well. After that, Dark lived in seclusion and almost didn't show up in the outside world. She used a meditation method to transform the dead fetus in her belly into a ghost fetus and continued to be pregnant. Although the fetus grew up very slowly, it was indeed a kind of magical technique. The 3 looked at each other and didn't expect such a magical thing. Needless to say, they knew that the ghost fetus in Dark's belly was Taishu Xian, the current underworld saintess. This must be the strange birth of Taishu Xian, who was born with the underworld body that Granny Yin mentioned before. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed. Little Xian, who was born with the underworld body, was finally born. It was a happy event in the Cold Moon Palace. However, the birth of Xian Lass seemed to herald the arrival of a bloody storm in the god realm. When Xian Lass was just able to walk, Ming, who had never left the Moon Palace, took Xian Lass out of the Moon Palace for the first time for her daughter's sake. She wanted to let Xian Lass experience the outside world. At that time, I accompanied her. However, as soon as I went out, I got into big trouble because of Dark's beauty. In a beautiful place, Ming saw that there were few people around, so she removed the veil that covered her face so that it would be easier for her to play with her daughter, who knew that she would bump into the descendant of the ancient light god, Qin Yang, passing by with a group of people. When Qin Yang first saw Ming's appearance, he was stunned. He actually said that he wanted Ming to be his concubine. We obviously wouldn't agree. We also knew that we weren't their match, so we could only run for our lives. Just as we were being chased by them to the point where we had nowhere to run, we suddenly saw a murderous aura in the distant sky. Black demonic clouds blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they surged over. Such a powerful aura stunned us and our pursuers. We even thought that an ancient god was passing by. Only Ming stared at the sky and gnashed his teeth as he said, "He's here." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. I saw a man standing in the demonic clouds in the sky. His entire body was covered by a black waistcoat. A fierce and austere aura surged out from his body and filled the heaven and earth. It made people shudder. One of his hands reached out from the waistcoat, and there was a black crystal ball in his palm. He looked down coldly and said, "Ming, I felt your fear, so I came out of seclusion in advance. Tell me who made you so afraid." Granny Yan's eyes were confused. She sank into endless memories. She said with an abnormally complicated expression, "After hearing this, although I haven't seen Night before, I immediately guessed that this person was him. Qingyang, whose interest was disturbed, immediately asked who he was. Night replied indifferently, I'm a demonic god. Qingyang asked the people around him who the demonic god was, but they all said that they had never heard of him. In reality, Night really wasn't conferred the title of demon god back then. Qingyang asked him who it was that gave him the title of demon god, but Night said that no one else had the right to confer the title on him. He was the one who gave it to himself. That made Qingyang and the others laugh aloud. Without a doubt, they relaxed after learning that Night had no background. Qingyang's lackeys immediately used the ancient god of light as a background and told Night to piss off and stop disturbing their hunt. After learning that Qingyang wanted Ming to be his concubine, Night's demonic nature was immediately triggered. A huge hand reached out from the demonic clouds beneath his feet and grabbed Qingyang into the clouds effortlessly. The others wanted to save Qingyang, but they were all instantly reduced to dust by the huge hand condensed from the roiling demonic clouds beneath Night's feet. They could not even fight back at all. The one who suffered the most was Qingyang. Who knows what he did to him, but he was bound by the demonic clouds beneath Night's feet. Not only was he unable to break free, but his flesh and blood were also devoured by the vicious, sharp-toothed ghost heads conjured by the demonic clouds. Qingyang's miserable cries under Night's feet were ear-piercing. He no longer looked like a human. He had basically gone through all kinds of torture. Night said that he wanted to make Qingyang suffer a fate worse than death. He wanted to suffer the demon devouring, for all eternity under his feet, never to be reborn. Before long, the weather in the surroundings changed. Night looked at the surging clouds and said that his presence had already alarmed quite a few experts. Someone was hurrying over, so he told us to retreat for now. Meanwhile, he wanted to bathe the god world in blood for revenge from 1,000 years ago. Back then, I was so shocked by his demonic flames that I did not even dare to breathe loudly. Ming had no intention of saying anything else to him, so we quickly left. However, not long after we left, we suddenly heard Night's voice ripple through the god world. His tone was abnormally domineering and cold. I, demon god Night, have returned. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will die. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will be wiped out. From today onwards, I will bathe the entire god world in blood. From today onwards, the god world will no longer need the 6 great races. The 6 ancient gods will all die. They will use their lives to pay for your years of greed. From today onwards, I, demon god Night, will put an end to everything. Light, your descendant Qingyang is begging for mercy under my feet. Why are you still cowardly and cowardly? Could it be that you don't dare to come out and fight me? When Yu Qianshou and the others heard this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This demon god's tone was a little too arrogant. He actually wanted to go against the 6 great races led by the 6 ancient gods. He even said that he wanted to bathe the entire god world in blood. He was too arrogant. Night's undisguised and deliberate words immediately shocked the entire god realm, and the curtains of a bloody battle were drawn. After that, we found out that the current Night was no longer the same as before. His demonic arts could be said to be omnipotent. He waited for the experts of the god world to gather at the place where he saved us. He did not run or avoid the battle. In that battle, he slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people from the 6 clans. Their corpses piled up like a mountain. He stood at the peak of that mountain of corpses and sea of blood. Under his feet, there was Qingyang, who was neither human nor ghost, screaming miserably day in and day out. Yu Qianshou and the others were speechless. They imagined the scene at that time. How tall would it be when the corpses of hundreds of thousands of people were piled up? In the end, the experts of the 6 clans were killed to the point that they did not dare to come close. Night no longer needed anyone to confer him the title of demon god. Just the fact that he stood at the peak of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood without anyone daring to touch him was enough to make his name resound throughout the god world. Just as he said, no one was qualified to confer him the title of god. The 6 ancient gods never thought that the current Night would actually be so ferocious. Unless they personally took action, no one would be able to deal with this great evil. In the end, the ancient god Light was the first to lose his cool. Regardless of whether he had feelings for Qingyang or not, Qingyang was still his descendant. Now that he was being trampled by Night, day and night, it was no different from a slap to his face. He had no choice but to save him. The ancient god of light finally took action. Originally, everyone thought that Night was dead for sure this time, but in the end, everyone's jaws dropped. The ancient god of light was actually forced to flee by night, and luckily managed to escape with his life. Night left the mountain of corpses and sea of blood and chased after the ancient god of light. Although he managed to escape, he barged into the territory of the ancient god of light. He killed everyone on sight regardless of gender or age. He massacred the descendants of the ancient god of light, but the ancient god of light did not dare to show himself to protect his own. With that, the title of demon god stood at the peak of the god world. With that, the 6 ancient gods could no longer sit still. They all regretted provoking this great evil. If the demon god only dealt with the Light Clan, the others might have been intimidated by the demon god's methods and ignored him. However, the demon god had already spread the word that he wanted to deal with everyone in the 6 ancient gods. He wanted to massacre them all. With the cooperation of the ancient god of light, the scene of the 6 ancient gods working together to fight the enemy appeared for the first time. They trapped the demon god who was wantonly slaughtering people in the god world. The demon god did not run or hide and took the battle head-on. A fierce battle that changed the color of the sky and made the sun and moon lose their light made the entire god world tremble. Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. His Adam's apple vibrated as he said, "What happened in the end?" Song Yun, Xian and Xin Yu were confused. Of the 6 ancient gods, 2 were killed and 4 were injured. The demon god himself was also seriously injured. However, the remaining 4 ancient gods, including the ancient god of light, were chased by the demon god all over the god world. It seemed like the demon god would not stop until he killed them. Wherever he went, he would kill anyone he saw. His ferocity was simply hair-raising. In the end, the 4 ancient gods who could no longer fight were forced to flee into the territories of the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god respectively to seek help. I don't know if the 2 ancient gods who never participated in any battles helped them. However, after the demon god chased them into the territories of the 2 ancient gods, no one knew what was happening inside. When the demon god came out again, the 4 ancient gods also came out with their tails between their legs. The 5 of them went their separate ways and seemed to have resolved the battle between them. Therefore, some people guessed that the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god joined forces with the 4 ancient gods to suppress the demon god. Others said that it was the mysterious Tao who resolved the battle between the 5 of them. However, none of the people involved were willing to mention this matter. In short, no matter what the truth is, the demon god had already become the #1 expert in the god world in everyone's hearts by defeating 6 ancient gods alone. Chapter 1067. This result made the 3 of them sigh endlessly. Yu Qianqiu even felt his scalp go numb. He couldn't help but think of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes he saw in the sky above the Lingfang Valley. When he thought that Yan Zhuixing had such a powerful person behind him, he immediately felt extremely pressured. He didn't know whether it would be a blessing or a disaster in the end. How did it end up like this? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the graves on both sides, especially the grave of the moon god, and asked, "I can understand that Tai Shu Jing died a long time ago. Could it be that the moon god also participated in the battle against the demon god?" A miserable look flashed across Grandma Yan's face. She shook her head and said, "After the demon god defeated the 6 ancient gods, he came to the moon palace to look for Dark." When he heard the babbling Xian girl calling Dark mother, his expression changed drastically. He didn't expect that Dark could make a dead fetus become a ghost fetus. He thought that it was a child that Dark had with another man. So he immediately questioned Dark, whose child was it? In order to anger him, Dark admitted that it was a child that she had with another man. Of course, she was also afraid that he wouldn't let go of the child after hearing that it was Zheng's daughter. The demon god knight was so angry that he laughed. He angrily scolded Dark for being shameless and Zheng dying for her. Then he asked which man's bastard child was it. Seeing that Dark didn't answer, his eyes immediately locked on the man standing beside her, who was my husband, the moon god. He thought that my husband was the man who had an affair with Dark. In a rage he attacked. Just think, how could my husband be a match for him? He died in his hands unjustly. Even if we wanted to save him, we couldn't do it in time. Until the demon god knight also wanted to kill Xian girl, Dark had no choice but to tell him about Xian girl's identity. If he wanted to kill them, he should kill them both. I don't know why, but after the demon god knight knew that Xian girl was Zheng's daughter, he didn't kill her. He just glanced at Xian girl a few more times before leaving. After that, Dark kept apologizing to me and kept apologizing. Then the Phoenix clan sent a decree saying that the mausoleum of the god of sin, where only gods were buried, would be opened. Those who died in this disaster could be buried in the mausoleum of the god of sin. When I was disheartened and prepared to stay with my man in the mausoleum of the god of sin forever, Dark came to me with Xian. She entrusted Xian and Taishu Zheng's bodies to me and asked me to bring them to the mausoleum of the god of sin together. She said that she would give her man and my man an explanation. To be honest, I hated her at that time. After all, my man died because of her. After I accepted Xian and Taishu Zheng's corpses, I secretly followed her to see how she was going to explain to her man and my man. In the end, I saw her self-destruct in front of the demon god knight, intending to perish together with the demon god. That earth-shattering bang completely woke me up from my hatred. However, the demon god knight's demonic power was too strong. Dark's self-destruction did not cause any damage to him. After the smoke dissipated, the demon god knight knelt at the place where Dark had self-destructed with a dispirited look. He was bleeding from his 7 apertures and howling endlessly. It was almost unbearable to look at. I wanted to wait for the demon god knight to leave, then take Xian to the place where her mother died for the last time. Then I would take her away to the mausoleum of the god of sin and never come back. Unexpectedly, the demon god knight knelt there and howled for more than 3 days and 3 nights. I didn't dare to stay any longer. I was afraid that he would cause trouble for Xian when he woke up, so I took her to the mausoleum of the god of sin. It was not until the mausoleum of the god of sin was sealed again that I felt relieved. Then, for so many years I have been guarding the mausoleum with Xian. Who would have thought that Xian would keep asking me about her parents after she grew up? I wanted to hide it from her for the rest of her life. But one time, after she kept asking me, I thought that she would not be able to leave this place anyway, so I told her everything. However, not even in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that she would predict that there would come a time when the barrier of heavens would be lenient. After that, she left behind a jade archive, saying that she wanted to avenge her parents. Then she quietly left. I still regret this to this day. After listening to this dispute involving the high and mighty gods, the 3 of them fell silent. Who could say who was right and who was wrong? Even though the demon god was infamous for killing countless innocent people, who could say that he was the only one at fault? Time flew by like a fleeting cloud. The countless joys and sorrows brought about by the dispute between the gods might just be the beginning of a never-ending process. Granny, you don't need to feel guilty. Now Taishu Xian is living a good life in the netherworld. She wants to seek revenge on the demon god. To put it bluntly, I'm afraid that she doesn't even have the chance to come into contact with the demon god. How can she seek revenge? Yu Qianqiu sighed and comforted her. Knowing that these grudges would not affect Bai Suzhen's cultivation of the Myriad Demon's Heart Sutra, he felt a lot more at ease. After listening to these grudges that involved the heavenly realm, he also felt that there was no meaning in fighting and killing. But this was a cultivation path that could never be turned back once one set foot in it. If one did not actively prepare for it, one might suffer unbearable pain in the future. One could only continue on this path, there was no way to avoid it. I hope so. But the world is full of misfortunes and no one can be certain. Grandma Yen looked at Yu Qianqiu with a gentle gaze and smiled faintly. I have told you everything that needs to be said. Since you and Xian are close friends, then do me a favor. Help me persuade her to come back after you leave this place. What a joke. She is the underworld saintess. How am I qualified to persuade her? I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to even see her. Yu Qianqiu coughed awkwardly and said, Grandma, in my opinion, let's just let nature take its course. If she wants to come back, she will naturally come back. If she doesn't want to come back, even if you catch her and bring her back. As he spoke, he looked at Jiu Yu and continued, unless you keep an eye on her all the time, she will still find a way to get out. Jiu Yu looked at Grandma Yen with trepidation after hearing his words. He could enter and exit the barrier of heavens at will. If Grandma Yen used him to find Taishu Xian, would she kill him to stop Taishu Xian from leaving this place again? After pondering for a while, Grandma Yen nodded slightly and said, You are right. Maybe when she is really tired outside she will naturally come back. Otherwise, if her heart is outside, even if I forcibly catch her back, it will be no different from torture to her. A person who cannot calm down will not be able to stay here forever. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief and cupped his hands at her. Don't worry, Grandma. If I see her, I will definitely tell her that you miss her very much. He was about to bid farewell. Grandma Yen smiled and nodded. Okay. I won't see you off. I hope you can find the person you are looking for. Goodbye. Yu Qianqiu bowed and flashed to the flying shuttle. Grey Cloud Xin and Jiu Yu also bowed and bid farewell. Then, under Grandma Yan's nod and smile, the flying shuttle flew away. The flying shuttle traveled southward under the bright moonlight. From time to time, the gazes of the three people swept across the vast land where the gods were buried. They were all silent. Their minds could not help but return to the grudges of the gods that Grandma Yen had told them. For a moment they felt so small. After a long time, Yu Qianshou suddenly asked, "Jiuyu, do you know where that old Meng is?" "I don't know." Jiuyu shook his head and continued to explain, "However, most of the tombs here are buried in the center of the cemetery. There are very few people like Granny Yen who have their tombs buried close to the celestial boundary formation. If I see a tomb along the way to the south, it should be the tomb of old Meng." "Damn it. Why didn't you say so earlier? If I knew you didn't know, I would have asked Grandma Yen," Yu Qianshou said gloomily. "Yu Qianshou, it seems that you have a lot of secrets." Gray Cloud Xan suddenly spoke. He turned back to look at Yu Qianshou and sneered. "You really seem to know the underworld saintess. What I'm curious about is, when have you seen the underworld saintess?" "I refuse to answer," Yu Qianshou retorted without hesitation. Gray Cloud Xan choked and was speechless. Little did he know that Yu Qianshou was already thinking about how he knew too many secrets. Because he had killed his grandson, it was impossible for him to reconcile with him. Therefore he was thinking about how to get rid of him. After flying in silence for a whole day, the three of them stood on the flying shuttle and stared in three different directions. Suddenly there was a loud boom in front of them. They could feel the ground shaking in the air. There were experts fighting. The flying shuttle suddenly stopped. The three of them looked at each other and suddenly heard someone shouting angrily in the distance. "Old thief! Don't run if you have the guts." Yu Qianshou's eyelids twitched and he said in a deep voice, "Let's go. Let's go and take a look." The other two also vaguely guessed something. Gray Cloud Xian hesitated for a while, but he still drove the flying shuttle in the direction of the battle. Not long after, the three of them saw that under the silvery moonlight, there were huge potholes everywhere. In front of them, there was a hill that was miraculously preserved. They could vaguely see a tomb that was exactly the same as the one they saw at Grandma Yan's. At the top of the hill there was a stone house built on the slope. Although it was simple, it was slightly more majestic than Grandma Yan's stone house. Apart from the hill, the surrounding areas had indeed been destroyed to the point of being unrecognizable. Gray Cloud Xn drove the flying shuttle and maintained a distance, not daring to approach. What a joke. They did not know this person. Moreover, the angry shout just now was filled with sparks of gunpowder. The other party was so angry, how could they trespass on his territory? "May I ask if this is Senior Meng's residence?" Yu Qianshou shouted in the direction of the hill. In the end, there was no response even after shouting a few times. The three of them looked at each other and reckoned that the person should have left. Perhaps he went to chase after someone. At this moment, a stream of light appeared in front of them in the blink of an eye. The speed was so fast that it gave the three of them a fright. A gray-robed old man with his hair tied up in a slanted bun appeared. He looked at the three of them angrily and asked with a choking voice, "Who are you? Why did you trespass here?" Chapter 1068. Seeing that the other party's hair was crooked from anger, the three of them looked at each other. They were almost certain that this was Old Man Meng, who was annoyed by the harassment. Yu Qianshou cupped his hands and said, "May I ask if you are Senior Meng?" Seeing that the other party actually knew who he was, the old man's angry expression eased a little, and he said in a deep voice, "That's me. What's the matter?" Yu Qianshou's eyes lit up and he chuckled and said, "We were introduced by Grandma Yen from the north. We heard that Senior Meng encountered some trouble, so Grandma Yen asked us to come and see if there's anything we can help with." "Grandma Yen introduced you?" Old Man Meng was stunned, and he immediately checked the cultivation of the three of them. As a result, the corner of his mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer as if to say, how could the three of them be of any help with their cultivation? He took out a jade talisman and after entering a spell into it, he crushed the jade talisman into powder. The three of them understood that the other party was obviously doubting the authenticity of their identity, and he might even be verifying it with Grandma Yen. The three of them could not help but feel lucky that they had a good relationship with Grandma Yen, and it should not ruin their business. After a while, Old Man Meng looked at the three of them and nodded slightly. "All right. I'm annoyed by that old thief. The three of you can act as hidden sentries at the edge of the all heavens boundary. When you see him, immediately send me a message lest I lose sight of him." As he spoke, he took out another 3 jade talismans and flicked them into the hands of the three of them. "Sure." Yu Qianshou put away the jade talismans generously, and then asked with a trace of suspicion, I heard from Grandma Yen that that person wants to rob the tomb of the god of sin guarded by Senior. May I ask Senior, why does he want to rob the tomb? Could it be that there are some treasures hidden in the tomb? At the mention of this, Old Man Meng's face suddenly collapsed, and he said with a hideous expression, I've met a madman. At first I thought he wanted to rob the tomb, but later on, I understood that he was using me to practice and improve his cultivation. Every time I chased him away, I found that his cultivation had increased a little when I fought him again. The speed at which his cultivation increased was monstrous. If this continues, I'll sooner or later be defeated by him. I must seize the opportunity to eliminate him before he becomes powerful, otherwise I'll definitely be humiliated one day. It's truly infuriating. Sigh. It was like Old Man Bai's style. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He smiled awkwardly and said, Since Senior knows the reason, why did you still fight with him? If you don't fight with him, he won't have the chance to improve his cultivation. You think I want to fight him? If I liked fighting and killing, would I have come to the mausoleum of the god of sin to guard the tomb? The key is that if I don't fight with him, that madman will really dig up the tomb. Even if I can watch him dig up the tomb and not do anything, if you don't fight with him, he'll take the initiative to attack you. Am I supposed to just stand there and let him beat me? Old Man Meng roared like a madman. Even though he was a few meters away, his spittle was almost splattered all over the faces of the three of them. The bun on the back of his head swayed back and forth in anger. It seemed like he was about to break down from the torture. After spitting, he seemed to have realized that there was no need to lose his temper with the three of them. He waved his hand and pointed in the direction of the all-heavens boundary, saying, The three of you split up and guard the edge of the all-heavens boundary. Once you find that green-robed old thief, immediately send a message to me. Okay, we'll go now. Yu Qianqiu called out to his companions, and Sangyun Xian immediately flew in the direction of the all-heavens boundary on the flying shuttle. The huge moon hung high in the sky, and the bright moonlight shone on the earth as tranquil as water. After getting away from Old Man Meng, Sangyun Xian couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianqiu, why are you looking for that person? Could it be that you really want to help Old Man Meng take care of that person? You have to think this through. Even with Old Man Meng's cultivation, he's a headache. He's not someone we can afford to provoke. Xinyu nodded in agreement. What a joke. We're looking for him, not provoking him. Yu Qianqiu snickered. Finding Old Man Meng first was just to confirm how to find that person. Now that we have a way, we'll leave this place immediately after we find that person. We won't meet Old Man Meng again, so there's no need to worry too much. But I still have to stay here in the future. Xinyu mumbled weakly. However, he had no human rights and no one responded to his words. He looked miserable. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing silently on the flying shuttle, would look at the surroundings from time to time. He often wondered what was so strange about the mausoleum of the god of sin that could block his ability to sense the silver balls that Bai Changchun carried in Utopia. He was sure that the silver balls that he gave to Bai Changchun were still with him and had been brought into the boundary formation. Otherwise he would have sensed the silver balls. If he could sense their whereabouts, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. After spending nearly an entire day, the three of them finally arrived in front of the cliff. On one side, the stars and moon shone brightly on the earth, while on the other side, it was completely dark. In the darkness ahead was the boundary formation that was filled with an inexplicable power. After putting away the flying shuttle, Yu Qianqiu pointed to the left and right and said, Old Song, find a place to wait on the left. Xinyu, find a place to wait on the right. I'll wait here. When you see him, just bring him to me. Sangyun Xian was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He said in shock, Are you kidding me? Who do you think he is? Do you think the two of us can bring him here just because we say so? Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and smiled. That's true. He's not as easy to talk to as I am. If you dare to make irresponsible remarks in front of him, you'll definitely suffer. Don't worry. As soon as you see him, immediately shout Yu Qianqiu. When he hears you shout my name, he'll naturally come to you to ask what's going on. There shouldn't be a problem if you bring him here. At the very least, he'll give you time to send a message to me and wait for me to find him. At the very least, if you say my name, at least he won't hurt you. Sangyun Xian and Xinyu looked at each other. The former asked suspiciously, What's the use of saying your name? Is this for real? Are you familiar with him? Don't ask any more. You'll know the result when the time comes. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Go quickly. If you miss the chance to meet him, the immortal emperor's wedding is not far away. We don't have time to delay anymore. After a moment of hesitation, the two of them split up and flew in different directions doubtfully. Yu Qianqiu stood alone in the same spot, rubbing his hands excitedly. He looked up at the big moon in the sky and hoped that he could pull Bai Changchun to the immortal world to support him. 3 days passed by unwittingly in the midst of waiting. In a desolate stone forest, Xinyu carefully hid in it and silently observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw the air in the all-heavens boundary ripple like water in front of him. A thin old man in a green robe broke through the rippling air and slid out of the all-heavens boundary like he was standing on the bow of a ship riding the wind and waves. The thin but spirited old man in a green robe floated under the stars and moon, his eyes shining brightly as he looked around. Xinyu immediately guessed that this was the person Yu Qianqiu wanted him to find. However, when he saw this person, his heart couldn't help but tremble. This person's eyes were filled with an indomitable sharpness. That skinny yet sonorous aura made it seem as if this person could rip him apart with just his gaze. His intuition from many years of hiding told him that this person was very dangerous. Therefore, he threw Yu Qianqiu's instructions to the back of his mind and subconsciously wanted to hide first. His head shrank slightly and his body hunched, trying to hide behind the rugged stone pillar. As for what would happen next, he would think about it later. He didn't want to take any life-threatening risks. However, before half of his head could completely hide behind the stone pillar, his clothes lightly brushed against a protruding stone. One of his eyes, which had not hidden behind the stone pillar in time, immediately saw the other party suddenly staring at him. The divine gaze was like electricity piercing one's heart, and the substantial divine sense was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, cleanly and neatly sweeping through the terrain of the entire stone forest. Xinyu was shocked. Without saying anything, he wanted to turn around and teleport away. However, just as he was about to turn around, the air around him suddenly froze and a strong pressure pressed down on him on the spot. He couldn't move at all. At this moment, it was difficult to even move a single step with all his cultivation, let alone teleport away. He immediately panicked. It was only at this moment that he thought of using Yu Qianqiu's name to try and save his life. However, his lungs were already being squeezed to the point of bursting, let alone opening his mouth to speak. Even his right to explain had been taken away in an instant. The thin green-robed elder slowly descended from the sky in front of him. He looked him up and down and said indifferently, "Why are you sneaking around here and spying on me?" As soon as the elder asked this, Xinyu immediately found that the strong pressure pressing down on his lungs had disappeared. Although he still couldn't move, at least he could breathe and speak. He didn't say anything to explain and panted as he said, "Yu Qianqiu? Yu Qianqiu. It was Yu Qianqiu who asked me to wait for you here." This thin green-robed elder was none other than Bai Changchun, who was injured by the emperor of the underworld and fled here. Hearing the other party say Yu Qianqiu's name as soon as he opened his mouth, even though he had always been calm, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. The other party had said Yu Qianqiu's name 3 times in a row, so he naturally didn't hear it wrong. But what he couldn't figure out was why Yu Qianqiu would arrange someone here to wait for him. Wasn't this disciple of his too powerful? He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu's magical power couldn't be connected to this place. After frowning and thinking for a while, he shook his hand in his sleeve and a small handful of silver balls appeared in his palm. He nodded slightly thoughtfully. He thought that Yu Qianqiu had found his whereabouts because of these silver balls, but he couldn't break into the powerful boundary formation of all heavens, so he arranged someone to wait for him here. Could it be that something had happened for him to be in such a hurry to find him? The moment Bai Changchun kept the silver balls in his hand, the strong pressure around him disappeared. Xinyu immediately felt relaxed and his whole body swayed as if he was drunk. Chapter 1069. It was not a good feeling to be almost crushed to the point of exploding, but to be completely relaxed in an instant. Jiyu steadied himself and looked up at the other party. The other party asked, "Did Yu Qianqiu ask you to come?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu's name could really save his life, Xinyu didn't have any other thoughts. He nodded and said, Yes. He asked me to wait for you here. He said to say his name when I see you, so." Bai Changchun would not listen to him and interrupted, "He's here too. He's over there." Just as Jiyu raised his hand and pointed, he saw a blur in front of him. His clothes tightened around his waist and the wind whistled in his ears. He was dragged away by the other party. Yu Qianqiu, who had been staring in the direction of the all-heavens boundary for the past few days, suddenly turned his head to the right and saw a green light whistling over. When it approached, it threw out a black shadow which immediately scared him. Bang! Xinyu cried out in pain and struggled to get up from the ground. Then Bai Changchun appeared in front of him and looked at him from head to toe. Yu Qianzhou looked at Xinyu in a daze. He didn't know how he had offended Bai Changchun, causing him to make such an entrance. However, he didn't have time to think about it. He bowed to Bai Changchun and said, "Disciple greets master." "Master?" Jiyu, who had just gotten up, was stunned. He looked at the two in surprise. So he was his master. No wonder he said his name would be useful. Bai Changchun nodded and frowned. "Why are you here?" "I heard that master was injured by Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi and escaped here. So, I wanted to see how master's injuries were. However, this place is very strange. So, I tried my best to find master." Yu Qianzhou briefly described what happened after he arrived in the immortal world and how he found this place. He used voice transmission because Jiyu was present and some secrets were not convenient to be revealed. Naturally, Xinyu could tell that the two of them were avoiding him through voice transmission. He didn't dare to have any opinions, so he obediently stood by the side and didn't say a word. After listening to Yu Qianzhou's story, Bai Changchun couldn't help but look at Yu Qianzhou in amazement. He didn't expect his disciple to have such a rich and bizarre experience. Suddenly, he stared at Xinyu with a strange gaze, sending chills down Xinyu's spine. He wondered what bad things Yu Qianzhou had said about him. Just as Xinyu shrunk his neck, he saw Bai Changchun's hand grabbing at the void and pulling Xinyu into the air. Xinyu was so shocked that he screamed, "Yu Qianzhou, save me? Master!" Yu Qianzhou was about to plead for Xinyu, but Bai Changchun raised his hand and lifted Xinyu in the air. He said indifferently, "The power of the all-heavens boundary is not to be underestimated. I want to see how this little demon can enter and exit freely." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw Jiu into the all-heaven boundary formation hundreds of meters away with a whoosh. The moment Xinyu was thrown into the all-heavens boundary, his whole body was immediately shrouded in a layer of faint light, which was bright and dazzling in the dark night. Yu Qianzhou was speechless and dug his ears. It was not easy to reason with this old man. Xinyu tumbled in the all-heavens boundary for a while. After he stabilized his body, he quickly flew out. Once he came out, the faint light shrouding his body immediately disappeared. Want to escape? He admitted that he did not have that ability, but he did not dare to approach that old monster in green robe again. The other party was too strong. If he wanted to make a move, he would not be able to resist at all. He was completely like a toy in the other party's hands. Therefore he stood weakly on the edge of the cliff. He did not dare to leave, nor did he have the guts to approach. "It's really amazing. I didn't expect there to be someone here who is not restricted by the all-heavens boundary." Bai Changchun stared at Xinyu in the distance and exclaimed slightly. Then he turned around and asked, "Where is that song something? I want to see how his Heartless Palace's 3 swords and 1 sword drawing style can dominate both the immortal and netherworld realms." "I will summon him back now." Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. He took out a jade talisman and quickly crushed it to send a message. He was looking forward to the scene of Tsang Yun Xian being abused. It would take some time for Tsang Yun Xian to come back. Yu Qianzhou did not waste time and said respectfully to Bai Changchun, "Master, I heard some news about the devil god from another tomb keeper. Maybe it will be of some use to you in the future." He relayed the story that Grandma Yen told him in detail. He only hoped that his master, who was determined to fight with the devil god, would be careful. That was a real heaven's favored one. If there was a chance to meet him, he must not underestimate him. The #1 expert of the god world. Bai Changchun muttered in a low voice. His green robe fluttered even though there was no wind, but his eyes shone brighter and brighter, revealing the uncontrollable passion in his heart. Yu Qianzhou seemed to feel a raging fire suddenly igniting in his skinny chest, burning fiercely. He massacred the divine realm by himself. Even the 6 ancient gods were not his match. Amazing. Bai Changchun let out a long sigh. The green robe on his body slowly calmed down, just like his emotions. He raised his head and looked at the big moon in the sky. His eyes were shining brightly as he said, "It seems that I still have a long way to go. I hope to see the glory of the #1 expert in the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then will my life not be in vain." When these words fell into Yu Qianzhou's ears, he couldn't help but worry. If his master really did encounter that terrifying demon god one day, then he didn't dare to think about it any further in fear. "Master, the current emperor of the underworld should not be your match, right?" Yu Qianzhou asked in a low voice. "Him? No wonder he is the emperor who controls the underworld." Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. He shook his head lightly and said, When I fought with his underworld generals, I used them as a reference to estimate his strength. In the end, I underestimated the Emperor of the Underworld's strength. Once we fought, I realized that I was ridiculously wrong. When he attacked, I did not have the strength to resist at all. In just 3 moves he severely injured me. Especially the speed of his attack, it was simply terrifying. Just 1 move. I was hit by his 1,300 punches in an instant. I was severely injured on the spot. If I had not dispersed most of the power in time, I am afraid that I would have died without a complete corpse. You would not be able to see me standing here today. He is so powerful. Yu Qianqiu cried out involuntarily. He looked behind him and said, "Could it be that you are still not his match? I heard from Grandma Yen that Old Man Meng's cultivation has already reached the early stage of the minor god realm. Even he could not do anything to you. Could it be that the Emperor of the Underworld is more powerful than him?" Previously, I thought that the Emperor of the Underworld's cultivation was the true late stage of the Underworld Emperor. But after hearing what you said, I understand that the Emperor of the Underworld's cultivation has probably long surpassed the late stage of the Underworld Emperor. According to my judgment, he should be slightly stronger than that Old Man Meng. But you don't have to worry. As he spoke, Bai Changchun suddenly looked at the All-Heavens boundary and said, "The All-Heavens boundary is a good place for cultivation. I have comprehended a set of magic arts to borrow strength from it. Even if I meet the Emperor of the Underworld again, although I may not be able to defeat him, it will be impossible for him to seriously injure me like last time. What's more, I feel that my cultivation has reached the critical point of breaking through again. It should not take more than a few days. After fighting a few rounds with Old Man Meng to clear up my doubts, I think it will be about time." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu slightly lowered his head with a somewhat gloomy expression. He had originally wanted to invite Bai Changchun to the immortal world to solve some problems. After all, who knew if the song he composed would be in line with Emperor Jin's wishes? If Emperor Jin or someone else wanted to deal with him afterwards, he could drag Bai Changchun out to suppress them. In that case, no one would dare to touch him in the future. But now it seemed that Emperor Jin's strength was not weaker than the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. He was not selfish enough to drag his master into danger. Bai Changchun glanced at him. In fact, from the moment he said that Empress Dowager Jin had issued a decree to force him to compose a song, and the date of the wedding was approaching, Bai Changchun already knew that this disciple was probably asking for his help. Now that this disciple heard that he was not a match for the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi, he did not mention anything about helping. It was obvious that this disciple was worried about the safety of his teacher. He could not help but nod slightly in his heart. He had not misjudged this disciple. However, how could he just stand by and watch as his disciple was in danger without doing anything? Bai Changchun clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the starry sky. There were some things that he would not tell Yu Qianqiu now. He was afraid that if he told him, this kid would become lazy and rely on him. This was the biggest taboo for a cultivator. This guy had already had enough adventures. It might not be a bad thing to train him more. A beam of light shot over from afar and suddenly stopped not far away. Songyun Xan appeared and looked over in shock. Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu both turned to look. Bai Changchun was still looking at the starry sky with his hands behind his back. Unmoved, Songyun Xan recognized the green-robed elder at first glance. It was the legendary person who challenged the Emperor of the Underworld. He looked closely and realized that the elder was only a mid-stage immortal emperor. He relaxed a little and flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. He cupped his hands at Bai Changchun and said, "You must be the expert who broke into the Underworld Royal Palace, fought the 4 generals of the Underworld, and challenged the Emperor of the Underworld? I am the Great Minister of the Heartless Palace, Songyun Xen. Greetings." Bai Changchun tilted his head and looked at him. Then he continued to look at the stars expressionlessly. Songyun Xian's expression was a little awkward. The other party did not seem to care about him at all. Although he was a little unhappy, a person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. The other party could fight the 4 generals of the Underworld alone, escape from the hands of the Emperor of the Underworld, and play around with the little god Old Man Meng. He admitted that he did not have the ability to do so, so he had to endure it. Yu Qianqiu, who was a little dispirited, immediately became energetic when he saw this. He rubbed his hands and smiled as he introduced Songyun Xen. "Old Song. To tell you the truth, this is my master. This is also the reason why I insisted on coming here." Chapter 1070. He's your master? Songyun Xen was shocked. He looked at the two of them in disbelief and said, "If he's from the human world, then wouldn't you, before Yu Qianqiu could say anything, Bai Changchun had already interrupted him with a cold snort. What's the point of someone who's about to die knowing so much? Songyun Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. His right hand was already on the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and said sternly, Yu Qianqiu, what's the meaning of this? Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun with an embarrassed smile. He did not know if Bai Changchun had the confidence to kill Songyun Xian. After all, he had personally witnessed Songyun Xian's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. It was simply too powerful. Bai Changchun slowly turned around and glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He said, You killed his grandson. There's already a death grudge between you and him. Leaving him alive will be a disaster. Master will help you get rid of this disaster today. How embarrassing. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands together in embarrassment. He did not expect the old man's temper to be so straightforward. He had not even asked for help, and the old man was already going to make a move. Songyun Xian immediately felt a great sense of danger. In a situation where he had no confidence in defeating his opponent, he knew that he could not stay here for long. Just as he was about to quickly escape, he suddenly felt a huge pressure pressing down on him from all directions. His expression immediately changed. Songyun Xian exhaled. His steps were as heavy as a mountain. Each step left a deep footprint on the ground. Dong dong dong. The ground shook as he retreated with great difficulty. The closer he got to the other party, the more dangerous it felt. He had thought that it would not be easy for the other party to suppress him. However, when he saw the other party standing with his hands behind his back, he immediately panicked. The other party really did have the strength to kill him easily. He immediately spat angrily, Bai Changchun, I have no grievances with you. Don't go too far. Let me see your 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on his hands that were about to pull out the sword, and he gave an irrelevant answer, Don't think about luck. If you don't pull out your sword now, you won't have another chance. Pull out your sword. At this point, Yu Qianqiu, who was behind Bai Changchun, dodged to the side of the cliff with Xinyu. He was prepared to leave if anything went wrong. Songyun Xian knew that there was no turning back now, so he shouted in shock and anger, Sword drawing style. With a wave of his hand, a dazzling bright light instantly shot out from his sleeve. The light instantly illuminated the world, and the startling light effortlessly broke through the huge pressure around him. Like a delicate heavenly dragon, the incomparably domineering light swept out with a whistling sound, as if it wanted to break the world apart. Almost at the same time, the green robe that was about to be engulfed by the shocking light seemed to be blown by a breeze. As it swayed, the brilliance of the stars and the moon in the night sky seemed to freeze, like a huge disk blocking in front of the skinny body. Xinyu, who was about to flash into the boundary barrier, and Yu Qianqiu, who was about to flash into utopia, were stunned at the same time. This was because they had both seen the domineering power of Songyun Xian's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. It was a powerful force that felt unstoppable. However, at this moment, the dazzling light was blocked by the huge void disk that was like a tall mountain. The surrounding air seemed to have been sucked out by the huge disk in an instant. The two of them even felt that the breath in their lungs was forcefully sucked out by the disk, making them almost suffocate. The void disk stood between heaven and earth. It was abnormally grand and huge, and it rippled with a mysterious luster. It blocked the shocking light that seemed to be able to split the world apart. The two of them originally thought that there would be an earth-shattering sound when they collided, but the combination of hardness and softness resulted in silence. Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, raised one hand and stroked his beard. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and his hand slid out from under his beard. He stretched out his hand toward the huge disk in front of him. The indomitable disk was immediately pushed forward by 3 feet and began to rotate slowly. It seemed to be rotating with great difficulty under the immense pressure. Bai Changchun suddenly let out a cold snort that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. He raised his hand in a very natural manner and drew 2 fingers towards the sky towards the huge disk that was rotating with difficulty. A ray of light zigzagged across the huge disk, as if it was going to split the huge disk into 2 from the center. Immediately, light and shadow intertwined on the huge disk. In the blink of an eye, half of it turned white and the other half black, turning into 2 yin and yang fish chasing each other head to tail. The entire disk immediately rotated faster, stirring up the shocking light that was pressing against the huge disk. Although this exchange of blows seemed slow, it was actually completed in the time of a single breath. Tai Chi. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He stared at the yin and yang fish that were chasing each other. The huge disc was exactly the same as the Tai Chi diagram he saw in his previous life, and it was displaying the mysterious power of the Tai Chi diagram. Shen Yu's mouth formed a circle and his eyes widened. He never dreamed that Grey Cloud Xian's 3-in-1 sword drawing style would be blocked so silently. That was the 3-in-1 sword drawing style of the Heartless Palace that instantly destroyed half of Twilight City. However, what surprised him even more was yet to come. Return. Bai Changchun let out a sonorous chant. As his green robe fluttered, he pressed one of his palms towards the huge disc. The indomitable Tai Chi disc shrank rapidly, and the fierce light that followed it seemed to become a part of the Tai Chi disc, shrinking rapidly as well. In the blink of an eye, the shrunken Tai Chi disc merged with the shocking light and became the size of a wash basin. It absorbed and rotated in by Changchun's outstretched palm. Although the originally dazzling light had shrunk, it had become gentle. It was like a lantern covered with gauze, illuminating Bai Changchun's green robe particularly clearly. However, everyone could sense that the condensed ball of light in his palm was filled with a terrifying power that made one's heart palpitate. Is this the famous 3-in-1 sword drawing style of the Heartless Palace? As his green robe fluttered slightly, Bai Changchun clenched one hand behind his back and used the other to absorb the light ball. He said coldly, "That's all there is to it." "Oh, how is this possible?" Grey Cloud Xian's expression changed drastically in shock. He thought that the other party would use his powerful cultivation or treasures to forcefully break his sword drawing style, but he never expected that someone would be able to silently and gently absorb the power of his sword drawing style with just a wave of his hand. How could the great power that had already been released be absorbed by someone else again? It was so easily caught in his hand. He could actually catch the energy released by someone else with his bare hands. This was a great amount of released energy. It wasn't a physical object, so how was this possible? Grey Cloud Xian's face instantly turned pale. Only then did he know that the other party's strength far surpassed his, and he was no match for him at all. Fortunately, the great pressure that restricted his movements had already been broken by his sword drawing style. Any thoughts of resistance that Grey Cloud Xian had instantly vanished. Go. The faster the better, the further the better. Grey Cloud Xian fled in a flash. However, before he could move, Bai Changchun seemed to have already predicted what he would do. He said calmly, "I said that you're someone who's about to die. Do you still want to run?" The ball of light in his palm suddenly stopped spinning. With this stop, the ball of light immediately showed signs of expanding and exploding. Bai Changchun's palm pierced through the expanding ball of light at an extremely fast speed. As it moved in and out, his 5 fingers drew dreamy trajectories. Almost instantly, countless dazzling light beams shot out from the ball of light like a violent storm. They shot out densely like a net, and the sharp sound of them tearing through the air rang out incessantly. "Lost immortal finger." Yu Qianqiu mumbled with his mouth agape. This was the 3rd time he had seen his master use the lost immortal finger. He had never seen anyone survive this move. In reality, Grey Cloud Xian had already teleported and disappeared from where he was. However, his miserable cries could be heard from the void where the countless dazzling light beams shot out. The moment he appeared in the air, he was already riddled with holes by the countless dazzling light beams, and he was devoured in the blink of an eye. Following his miserable cries, his figure could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a dense meteor shower shooting into the starry night sky. After the energy of the expanding ball of light was vented, Bai Changchun pulled out his palm and pressed down on it. The ball of light was sucked back into his palm and started spinning again. However, its size had shrunk by half. Shen Yu and Yu Qianqiu, who were still standing dumbfounded at the edge of the cliff, suddenly saw Bai Changchun flick his sleeve. The ball of light flew over their heads with a whoosh, and entered the barrier of heavens behind them. The 2 silly birds turned around dumbfoundedly with their mouths wide open. They saw the ball of light distort the moment it entered the barrier of heavens. It was quickly torn apart by an invisible energy and silently disappeared without a trace. Such a powerful energy disappeared just like that. The 2 of them slowly turned around at the same time and looked at each other. They felt their throats go dry and they didn't know what to say. Finally, they looked in the direction that Grey Cloud Xian had escaped in. The scene of him being riddled with holes still appeared in their minds. Grey Cloud Xian's miserable cries seemed to still echo in their ears. Grey Cloud Xian, who was a middle-stage immortal emperor, was killed just like that? The 2 of them stole another glance at each other, as if they couldn't accept this reality. Shen Yu's expression was a little ugly. He didn't dare to look straight at Bai Changchun. Worry and hesitation appeared in his eyes. He didn't know if it would be his turn next. Even Grey Cloud Xian was killed so easily. He didn't think he had any chance of escaping. Old song. I'm sorry, I didn't expect him to make a move so quickly. I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye to you. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze from the sky and thought of the huge Tai Chi diagram from before. He flashed to Bai Changchun's side and asked with an embarrassed smile, "You really broadened my horizons just now. May I know the name of Master's move?" "I don't know. It doesn't have a name yet." The skinny figure shrouded in the green robe turned around. Bai Changchun put his hands behind his back again as if nothing had happened. He looked up at the darkness on the other side of the cliff and said, "This is a new power manipulation method that I comprehended in the barrier of heavens. One movement is divided into yin and yang. It's mysterious and profound. I still need to continue to comprehend and perfect it." Chapter 1071. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. He felt that this old man was indeed too abnormal. He could easily comprehend some kind of cultivation method. How could others who cultivated the same way as him endure it, especially him, his disciple? The theory of Tai Chi Yin and Yang seemed to have a complete system to follow in his previous life. Unfortunately, he was not an all-rounder who knew everything about astronomy and geography. He did not know much about this mysterious thing. Otherwise, he could really make up a few things to make the old man look at him differently. "Is there anything else?" Bai Changchun suddenly looked at him and asked lightly. "Ah." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He heard a hint of "don't disturb me if there's nothing else" from his master's words. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he still bowed and said, "Seeing that master is fine, disciple is relieved. Disciple still has some things to deal with, so I won't disturb master." Bai Changchun nodded expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu bowed again and left. Then he slowly took a few steps back and flashed to Shen Yu's side. He tilted his head and stole a glance at his master. He saw that Bai Changchun was still standing with his hands behind his back, looking up at the starry sky. His green robe fluttered in the night wind. Shen Yu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a panicked expression. He did not know what he wanted to do. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a smile and said, "Don't be nervous. I always keep my word. I promised to help you remove the restriction in your body, so naturally I will do it. Relax your body." Shen Yu was surprised and happy when he heard this. He looked at him in disbelief. He did not know if what he said was true or not. After all, he had not sent him out as promised. However, it was not up to him whether he believed it or not. He could only do as he was told and relax his body nervously. "Open your mouth." Yu Qianqiu let out a low growl, his 5 fingers grabbing towards Shen Yu's mouth. Shen Yu immediately felt the bead in his body rushing towards his throat. He quickly opened his mouth and a green light shot out. Yu Qianqiu's hand grabbed, and his fist was hidden in his sleeve. Shen Yu was overjoyed. He touched his chest and confirmed that the thing in his body had been removed. The stone in his heart immediately fell to the ground. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and didn't know what to say. After a while, he said incoherently, "I will definitely keep my promise and send you out. No need. I have my own way to leave, but I want you to promise me something else." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the all-heavens boundary outside the cliff. "Every year on this day you have to wait for me at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day. If I still don't come after a day, you have to come back. How about that?" Then he looked at Bai Changchun. Shen Yu also peeked at Bai Changchun. Although the restriction in his body had been removed, he had no choice but to agree. His master could enter and exit the all-heavens boundary at will. He had completely lost his defensive advantage. The consequences of not agreeing could be imagined. He nodded awkwardly. "I understand. Every year on this day I will wait for you at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day." A smile bloomed on Yu Qianqiu's face. "Shen Yu, don't blame me for using you. You have to know that you provoked me first. Furthermore, if it wasn't for my help, who knows when you would be able to return here. So, we are even now. You can go. Go back to the home you have been away from for 150,000 years. I'm glad to have met you in the netherworld this time. We will meet again if fate allows. I should go back now. Goodbye." Then he smiled and cupped his fists at Shen Yu. Then he turned around and bowed to Bai Changchun, who was standing under the moonlight with his hands behind his back. Just as Shen Yu cupped his fists to return the greeting, he realized that Yu Qianqiu had disappeared without a trace. There was no fluctuation in the air around him. He had no idea where Yu Qianqiu had gone. Did he really leave? Shen Yu was stunned. Then he became a little excited. With Yu Qianzhou's departure and the words he said before he left, the resentment that had accumulated in his heart disappeared instantly. Thinking about it carefully, Yu Qianzhou did not owe him anything. He even brought him back to the home that he had been away from for 150,000 years. Seriously speaking, he should be thanking him. Xinyu took a deep breath. The shackles that had been on him all these years had finally been removed. He could be free again. His gaze fell on the skinny old man in a green robe. He bowed respectfully to Yao Yao in silence. Then he turned into a stream of light and flew away without any worries or fear. After he disappeared into the distance, Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back and looking at the stars, suddenly looked outside the celestial boundary. His eyes flickered and he snorted coldly. "How dare you treat my disciple as a performer and sing for you? How majestic of an emperor! Just change the wedding ceremony to a funeral ceremony." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and turned into a stream of light that flew away quickly. He was heading in the direction of Old Meng. The sun was shining brightly in Utopia. Weeds and wildflowers clustered beside the gurgling stream. On a small mountain surrounded by the stream, Yu Qianzhou stretched out his hand to block the glaring sunlight. After staying in the dark netherworld for a long time, he really could not adapt to the sunlight. After a while, he put down his hand and looked around at the lush greenery at the foot of the mountain. It was so good to take a breath of fresh air. He could not help but sigh. Humans and ghosts are indeed different. People should stay where they are. After saying that, he closed his eyes again. After a moment of silence, he slowly shook his head and opened his eyes. He found that he had indeed completely lost contact with the tomb of the god of sin. Not only could he not find Bai Changchun, but the silver ball that he had thrown inside did not respond at all. He did not know what trick there was in the tomb of the god of sin to be able to isolate the outside world. It was impossible to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin at any time. Fortunately, he had made preparations in advance. He made an agreement with Xinyu once a year, so he had the opportunity to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin. It was unknown what he thought of, but after shaking his head he disappeared again. The sky was high and the sky was wide. At the peak of the love mound that suddenly emerged from the sea of clouds, Mei He, whose clothes were fluttering in the wind, held both of his hands with a gloomy expression. There was a broken nameplate in his hands. The owner of this nameplate was Grey Cloud XN. The breaking of the nameplate meant that the owner had died. Opposite him was the tall and thin Wang Qing. His wide blue robe was fluttering in the wind, and his long hair, which was not tied up, fluttered behind him. The eyes in the two holes of the silver mask were cold. He stared motionlessly at the nameplate in Mei He's hands. No one could see what expression he had on his face. Suddenly there was a rustling sound not far away. Mei He felt that the wind that swept back and forth on the mountain peak had solidified. He turned his head and saw that the 6 dragons snow blue, which was originally restrained, was now overflowing with light. The huge sword that was half inserted into the mountain peak was slowly being pulled out by itself. Mei He could feel the anger of his honored master. Thinking about it, the only one in the Heartless Palace who could use the 3-in-1 sword drawing style was the High Priest. The death of the High Priest was indeed a huge loss to the Heartless Palace. With a clang sound, the 6 dragons snow blue returned to its original position. The flowing light was restrained again, and the wind swept back and forth on the mountain peak again. Mei He raised his head slightly to look at his honored master, but he saw that his honored master had already turned around. He could only see his honored master's back. He said in an indifferent voice, "I will go down the mountain to attend Jintai's wedding ceremony in a few days. Before that, I don't want to be distracted. Release the news that your eldest senior brother has died. Take the opportunity to find out the cause of his death to deceive others. You will personally lead people to the netherworld and take the core forces of the Heartless Palace away in batches. When you reach the netherworld, there will naturally be people who will receive you." Mei He's waist straightened. He immediately felt that something was wrong. How was this investigating the cause of eldest senior brother's death? It was obviously secretly transferring the forces of the Heartless Palace to the netherworld. Could it be? Just as he was about to ask the reason, he saw Wang Qing raise his right hand slightly and stop him from asking any more questions. His indifferent voice continued to be ethereal. "If I am defeated by Jintai and can still survive, I will immediately go to the netherworld to meet you. If I am lucky enough to win against Jintai, I will naturally call you back to regroup. If I die, the disciples of the Heartless Palace will be under your command. If you have the chance to take revenge for me in the future, then do it. If not, then forget it." Don't ask any more questions. There are some things that you will naturally know when the time comes. Go do what you have to do. Mei's expression changed unpredictably. He paused for a moment before bowing and accepting the order, yes. Then he turned into a stream of light and entered the undulating sea of clouds on the mountainside. In a hidden valley outside the hallucinatory immortal city, Yu Qianzhou's head suddenly popped out from a corner of the mountain wall. He looked left and right to make sure there was no one around before popping out. He originally wanted to teleport back to the World Chamber of Commerce, but he thought that he had stayed in the Netherworld for such a long time. If no one saw him return, it would raise suspicions. Some things had to be explained, such as Zhang Yunxin's death. Unexpectedly, just as he popped out of the mountain wall and tidied up his clothes, he suddenly smelled a special fragrance. It was a familiar feeling. He then wrinkled his nose and fanned his nostrils, sniffing around with a puzzled expression. Just as he walked out of the crevice in the mountain, he suddenly heard someone shouting in the air, "Over there!" Yu Qianzhou looked up and saw 3 streams of light had already landed on the other side of the mountain slope. Although he couldn't see clearly what was happening over there, he heard a clear and melodious voice of a woman saying in a panic, "What are you trying to do?" Then he heard a lewd laughter and an unusually familiar dialogue, "Little girl, I don't think you're a disciple of any famous sect based on your clothes. You're sneakily hiding here and there by yourself. Did you do something shameful?" Someone immediately answered with a lewd laugh, "That's right. Stop obediently and let us examine you properly." "I didn't. It was you who chased me, that's why I was hiding." The woman who spoke suddenly screamed, "Don't come over. Otherwise my grandfather won't let you off." Chapter 1072. Damn it. Why are the ruffians in the immortal world so lousy, still stuck in the ancient times? Yu Qianzhou looked back in the direction of the hallucinatory immortal city, then looked in the direction of the lewd laughter. He couldn't help but pick his nose. Should he go back to do his own things or fight for justice and eradicate evil? What if he encountered a tough guy and was beaten up by the ruffians? His nose flapped again as he sniffed the fragrance, faintly evoking memories. He remembered the origin of this fragrance. He clenched his teeth and sighed, but he still dodged. Once he landed on the hill, he immediately saw 3 men surrounding a green-clothed little girl. He didn't guess wrong, it was the little girl called Lu Qin, who followed an old man to sell things in the hallucinatory immortal city. Yu Qianzhou sized up the 3 men and found that he couldn't see through their cultivation. Their cultivation was clearly higher than his, and their clothes were also somewhat familiar. They seemed to be disciples of some large sect. He couldn't help but frown. As expected, those who dared to do this kind of thing in the open had a background. The moment he landed, the 3 men below also noticed the movement and looked up. When they saw that it was Yu Qianzhou, their expressions changed slightly. How could it be him? A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Who didn't know the world commerce's sect master, Yu Qianzhou? Moreover, these 3 people had seen Yu Qianzhou with their own eyes. Although Yu Qianzhou didn't know them, they knew that no matter how strong their background was, this person couldn't be provoked. At least for now, this person was carrying the immortal emperor's decree and could do whatever he wanted. The green-clothed little girl looked up, and her eyes immediately lit up as if she had met her savior. She shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, save me." This girl's memory was really good. "I forgot what your name was, but you still remembered my name." Yu Qianzhou's mouth twitched. He was too embarrassed to ignore it now. He raised his brows and stared at the 3 people below with a sneer. "The 3 of you are really in a good mood. This Yu is interested to see what the 3 of you want to do. Continue, this Yu probably won't disturb you." "What do you mean I probably won't disturb you?" The trio's expressions changed again. One of them politely cupped his hands and said, "So it's sect leader Yu. We greet you." The other 2 hurriedly followed suit and bowed. The man then pointed to the green-clothed girl and said, "We saw her acting suspiciously and were just about to question her. Since Sect Master Yu is here, I believe she won't be able to cause any trouble. Let's hand her over to Sect Master Yu to handle." The other 2 nodded in agreement. They knew how to conduct themselves. They had the taste of letting you taste the soup of this little beauty first. Did he really think that all the men in the world were black? Don't you know what it means to be lecherous? Yu Qianzhou's face darkened immediately. He said in a low voice, "Bullsh*T. If you don't scram, I'll chop off your dog heads." The trio smiled flatteringly and immediately ran away with their tails between their legs. Yu Qianzhou looked at the 3 of them running away. He didn't fly into a rage and chase after them. Let's not talk about whether he could catch up to them or not. The key was that he didn't have the mood to fly into a rage. He reckoned that once he returned, the people from Heartless Palace would ask him why Grey Cloud XN died. There was also the matter of the Immortal Palace that he had to deal with. How could he be in the mood to cause more trouble? Hearing movement, he turned around cautiously. The green-clothed girl had already flashed to the hillside. Her 10 fingers were rubbing the edge of her skirt as she looked at him from a distance. Her pure eyes were flickering, and it was as if they could speak. There seemed to be anticipation and fear in her eyes. The fragrance became more and more alluring. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and shook his head with a smile. "Little girl, go home quickly. Don't run out alone in the future." After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. He didn't have the good moral character to send the little girl home. He had already tried his best to help her. After all, the world had become so chaotic. There were too many people who needed help. The weak were prey to the strong. He was in a precarious situation, so he had to deal with it carefully. How could he care too much? However, the little girl's crisp voice came from behind him. She said weakly, "My name is Lu." Yu Qianqiu stopped in his tracks and scratched his forehead speechlessly. He turned around and looked at her in confusion, as if asking what she meant. The green-clothed girl immediately said with anticipation, "Yu Qianqiu. We met in the hallucinatory immortal city. My grandfather was there too. You even gave me spirit stones." "So what?" Yu Qianqiu scratched his head again. He still didn't understand what the little girl was trying to say. Then realization dawned on his face. He took out a big handful of divine-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch and walked in front of her. He pulled out her hands that were rubbing the hem of her skirt, then pried open her slender fingers and placed the big handful of divine-grade spirit stones in her fair palms. The little girl's pretty and slightly immature face revealed a blank expression as she looked at him, then at the spirit stones in her hands. She also didn't understand what he was trying to say. After doing all this, Yu Qianqiu turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, flying in the direction of the hallucinatory immortal city. However, he immediately felt someone following him. When he turned around, he saw the little girl flying behind him. Why did it feel like she was following him? Could it be that they were going the same way? Yu Qianqiu's brows creased into a frown. His figure flashed and deviated from the direction he was flying in. In the end, the little girl also made a turn in the air and followed him. This time Yu Qianqiu couldn't take it anymore. His figure stopped, turning around and floating in the air. The little girl blinked her eyes as she stopped in front of him, her hands still holding the pile of spirit stones. "Miss Lu, why are you following me?" Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice. Lu had a blank expression on her face as if she didn't know anything. She raised the spirit stones in her hands and said, "Your things are with me." Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like this little girl was following him because she wanted to return the spirit stones to him. As expected, she was a naive person who didn't understand the ways of the world. It was all his fault for not making things clear. He smiled bitterly and said, "Miss Lu, these spirit stones are for you, there's no need to return them to me." Who knew that Luer's head would shake like a rattled drum, and she said, "My grandfather said that people's hearts are sinister. I can't simply take other people's things." Yu Qianqiu was choked by her words. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Since you know that people's hearts are sinister, you still dare to run around with me? I'll give you the spirit stones. Quickly go home and don't follow me anymore." "But you're a good person," Lu said very seriously. However, when she heard that the spirit stones were for her, she kept the things in her hands impolitely. These words were really ironic. Why don't I feel like I'm a good person? Yu Qianqiu scratched his nose in embarrassment and sized up the little girl again. He realized that her cultivation was similar to his and couldn't help but grit his teeth. Such a naive little girl with a low cultivation was like a piece of fatty meat wherever she went. He really didn't feel at ease letting her run around alone. He then asked somewhat gloomily, "I say Lu, where's your house? How can your grandfather feel at ease letting you run around alone?" Lu lowered her head slightly and said, "I also don't know where my house is. I snuck out alone. My grandfather still doesn't know that I ran out. I can't find my way back." After saying that, she looked at Yu Qianqiu with eyes filled with anticipation, as if she was saying, "Take me in." Yu Qianqiu's expression collapsed. How could the World Commerce Association casually take in outsiders? He wanted to immediately harden his heart and leave, but he couldn't win against the other party's clean and clear eyes. After hesitating for a while, he still gave in and asked, "Then what if your grandfather wants to find you but can't find you?" He won't. Lu Er shook her head repeatedly and said, if grandfather discovers that I'm not here as long as I'm still in the immortal realm, he can find me anytime he wants. He can sense where I am. There was such an ability? Wouldn't it have the same effect as his own golden beads? Yu Qianzhou's face was filled with suspicion as he said, since it's like this, then follow me first. When your grandfather finds you, then you can go home with your grandfather. After saying that, he suddenly had a feeling of abducting a good person. Lu Er nodded her head repeatedly in response as if wishing for it to be so. This unlucky girl who cheats people. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes at her and shouted, follow me. His figure flashed and flew towards the direction of the illusory immortal city. Lu Er followed with an excited expression. The sea of clouds in front of them was filled with flowing lights of all colors. The two of them also entered the sea of clouds one after the other. Here Yu Qianzhou deliberately slowed down his flying speed to let others have a chance to see that he had returned. As expected, his return was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, immediately causing a commotion in the illusory immortal city. On the rooftop of the World Commerce Association, De Ming Luan and Wei Chuanqiu were excitedly surrounding Yun Peng and talking about something. When they saw Yu Qianzhou land with a young lady, their expressions froze and they looked at Lu Er with astonishment. Lu Er moved behind Yu Qianzhou in fear. Yu Qianzhou looked at the three of them in confusion. Before he landed, he clearly saw that the three of them were filled with excitement and didn't know what good thing had happened. The three of them didn't ask about his return. Instead, it was Wei Chuanqiu who lifted her chin towards Lu Er and said with a frown, Yu Qianzhou, who is this young lady? De Ming Luan's eyes flickered. He faintly felt that he had seen this young lady somewhere before. She's called Lu Er. I picked her up on the road. Let me make arrangements for her first before coming back to talk. Yu Qianzhou turned around and waved at Lu Er, leading her down quickly. Walking in the corridor, he could faintly hear the sound of mahjong tiles being shuffled. Following the source of the sound to a door, Yu Qianzhou pushed open the door and couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile. The women were all here. 4 fighting bitterly and 1 watching. He really didn't know where they got their patience from to never get tired of playing. Actually, he had wronged them. They didn't know that no matter how fun it was, it couldn't withstand playing it day after day. This mahjong tile that didn't have any stakes had long lost its initial passion. The women usually cultivated in their own rooms. Coincidentally, Zi pulled them over to play today on a whim and coincidentally bumped into them when he came back. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the women turned around and were instantly pleasantly surprised. Those who were sitting all stood up. Zi even pushed the mahjong tiles away with a crash and exclaimed excitedly, Big liar! You're back. Chapter 1073. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's smiling face immediately sunk. He came back happily, but he couldn't seem to be happy when he met this woman. She made a fuss in front of everyone and didn't know what it meant to give others face. Yu Qianzhou gave her a dark look and moved to the side, making way for Luer behind him. The little girl looked curiously and timidly at the beautiful sisters in the room. The women looked at each other with complicated expressions. Wah! I didn't say anything wrong, right? Ziyi jumped out and turned to face her sisters. She pointed at Yu Qianzhou at the door and shouted, I said he was going to bring another one back for you. Turning around, she faced Yu Qianzhou with a face full of anger and said, I didn't think you wouldn't even let off such a young girl. Are you done? Yu Qianzhou looked at her coldly and snorted, None of your business. You're shameless. Ziyi scolded with a flushed face. Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered with her and nodded at Yanyu. Yanyu walked over and squeezed out a smile, saying, You're back. Yu Qianzhou pointed at Luer and said, She's called Luer. On the way back, I happened to see her being bullied by a few men, so I saved her. I saw that she didn't know the ways of the world and was afraid that she would encounter some danger, so I brought her back first. When the time comes, her grandfather will come to find her. You look after her first. Don't let her run around the World Commerce Association. Once these words were said, the women immediately understood. So it was like this. It wasn't what everyone thought at all. The furious Ziyi immediately became incomparably embarrassed. Her mouth pouted a few times and she lost her temper. Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept across the few women and coincidentally met with the 100 Charms Beauty's gaze. The 100 Charms Beauty calmly nodded and smiled, while Yu Qianzhou's gaze was somewhat flustered as he avoided it. He waved his hand at the few people and said, I still have some things to do. You guys help look after her. He pointed at Luer and left like he was escaping. Looking at the silhouette disappearing outside the door, the Allure Beauty's expression became slightly desolate. A trace of desolation flashed in her eyes, but she was immediately awakened by Ziyi's cheers. Ziyi was holding the little girl's hand as she clicked her tongue and asked in surprise, Are you called Luer? Liar. Did Yu Qianzhou help you deal with those men who bullied you? The few women didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at Ziyi. It wouldn't be wrong to say that they were envious of her. They envied her for being heartless. No matter how big the matter was, it was in the past. Next time she might still go against Yu Qianzhou. Yanyu had been secretly paying attention to the changes in the Allure Beauty's expression. In order to divert her thoughts, she secretly transmitted a message to her. Ziyi, this girl. The reason why she went against Yu Qianzhou at every turn was to use this method to attract Yu Qianzhou and make Yu Qianzhou pay more attention to her. However, she didn't know that Yu Qianzhou had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. If this continued, it would only make Yu Qianzhou hate her more and more. You must know that although Yu Qianzhou doesn't look like a good person and doesn't do anything good, he has a chivalrous and tender side in his bones. He doesn't like unruly and willful women. Ziyi's actions have produced the opposite effect. It looks like we have to find a chance to give her some advice. The Allure Beauty nodded slightly in agreement. She couldn't help but smile bitterly at Ziyi. Just when Yu Qianzhou returned to the rooftop, he suddenly noticed a stranger on the rooftop. It was an old man with a rigid face. From his blue robe, he could tell that he was from the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianzhou sneered in his heart. What should come has come. Seeing Yu Qianzhou walking over, Wei Chuanxiu and the other two revealed a strange expression. The blue-robed man cupped his hands at him expressionlessly and said, I am Fang Yi, a consecrator of the Heartless Palace. You must be the World Chamber of Commerce's sect master, Yu Qianzhou? So it's Consecrator Fang. I've heard a lot about you. Yu Qianzhou hurriedly returned the greeting with a smile. May I know why Consecrator Fang has come? Sect Master Yu is in charge of a sect and has many busy matters to deal with. I won't beat around the bush and get straight to the point. Fang Yi stared at Yu Qianzhou with a sharp gaze and asked, Sect Master Yu, our sect's great consecrator, Tsang Yunexin, was ordered to protect you. He has always been by your side. Now that you've returned safely, may I know where Consecrator Tsang is? Yu Qianzhou was stunned and asked with a face full of doubt, Didn't Consecrator Tsang return first? We separated a month ago. Didn't he return to the Heartless Palace? Wei Chuanxiu and the other two exchanged glances. Fang Yi raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly, Sect Master Yu, did you remember wrongly? Consecrator Tsang was ordered to protect your safety. Before receiving the decree of our sect master, he would never separate from you. Sect Master Yu, why don't you think about it carefully? Maybe you can remember where Consecrator Tsang is? It would have been fine if you didn't mention it. I'm angry now that you mention it. Yu Qianqiu glared at him and said, we originally wanted to go to the underworld's boundless horizon to have a look. Who knew that we would find a place called Underworld Spirit Manor in the Underworld River? Consecrator Tsang said that he would go in and explore it and would be back soon. He asked me to hide in a safe place outside and wait for him. In the end, I waited for a few days and didn't see him coming back to find me. I didn't know how long I had to wait for him. Remembering that the wedding of the Celestial Emperor was approaching, I took the Underworld Emperor's token and asked someone to send me back first. From what you said, could it be that he hasn't returned yet? Underworld Spirit Manor? The few of them frowned and muttered. From the looks of confusion on their faces, it seemed that they had never heard of such a place. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. If the Heartless Palace has the guts, go to the Underworld Spirit Manor to investigate. I will wait for the good news. Fang Yi opened his eyes and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said slowly, not long before Sect Master Yu returned, I received a message from the sect saying that the nameplate belonging to Consecrator Tsang had shattered. In other words, Consecrator Tsang is dead. The other three were not surprised at all. Obviously they had already heard about this from him. They all stared at Yu Qianqiu without blinking, as if they wanted to see something from his face. In the end, Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of shock, Consecrator Tsang is dead? How is this possible? How many people in the world can block his 3 swords as one sword drawing style? When did this happen? It's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. I received news that Consecrator Tsang met with an accident early this morning. Fang Ye's indifferent expression suddenly paused. As he said this, he recalled that the location of Consecrator Tsang's accident was in the underworld. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu had returned on the same day. How many people in the world could rush to the illusionary immortal city from the exit of the underworld in less than a day? After pondering for a while, Fang Yi cupped his fists and said, since Sect Master Yu doesn't know, I won't disturb you anymore. As he said this, he specially cupped his fists towards Yun Peng. Congratulations Mountain Lord Bai Yun for breaking through to the intermediate stage of Immortal Emperor. Everyone farewell. Then he turned into a flowing light and left. After everyone saw him off, Yu Qianqiu looked at Yun Peng and said in shock, Senior Yun's cultivation has broken through to the intermediate stage of Immortal Emperor? Yun Peng revealed a rare smile. This is all thanks to the Phoenix true blood you gave me. There's no need to be courteous with him, this is what he should do. You helped him guard his home, so it's natural for you to give him something. Wei Chuanxiu waved his hand and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of annoyance. Back then, I felt that it wasn't right for you to get Consecrator Tsang Yun to protect you. Tell me the truth, is Consecrator Tsang Yun's death really not related to you? You can't wash yourself clean even if you jump into the river Styx, believe it or not. Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. Alright. Now is not the time to argue about this. Deming Luan raised his hand to stop the two from bickering. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and frowned. It's good that you're back safely. Do you know that with the Immortal Emperor's wedding approaching, Immortal Empress Ji Wu has asked you about your composing progress multiple times? Everyone in the Immortal Palace is very concerned and has sent me multiple messages. As the leader of the Merchant Association, I have personally gone to the World Merchant Association many times for this matter. Since you're back, quickly prepare to go to the Immortal Palace with me. Damn it. What is this woman Ji Wu trying to do? Is she trying to trick me? Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He was still a little worried that Ji Wu would reveal his background. Although he knew that if she wanted to reveal it, she would have done so long ago. Wei Chuanxiu glanced at him and asked Deming Luan worriedly, will something happen to him if we really let him go to the Immortal Palace? Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. Isn't there still a few days? Isn't it too early to go now? Deming Luan sneered. What kind of occasion do you think the Immortal Emperor's wedding is? All the sect masters in the immortal world will be there to congratulate him. If you come up with something that can't be shown in public, will they let you perform in public? There's naturally a reason for you to go earlier. As he spoke, he looked at Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu's faces and finally at Yu Qianqiu's face. He said slowly, so you better think carefully. If you really don't have the confidence, you might as well say it now. Wei Chuanxiu's eyebrows twitched as she vaguely sensed something. She asked suspiciously, what do you mean? Deming Luan stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, you said you have the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Is this true? Yu Qianqiu looked at the three and thought that there was no need to hide it. He nodded, it is true. What does this have to do with the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Deming Luan's eyes lit up. Of course it has something to do with it. As far as I know, the token of the Emperor of the Underworld will not easily appear in the hands of unrelated people. It must be given to someone who is deeply trusted by the Emperor of the Underworld. If you really don't have the confidence for this wedding, we still have a chance to save our lives. That is, we will all hide in the underworld while we still have some time. With the protection of the Emperor of the Underworld, Jintai will not be able to do anything to us in the underworld. The Emperor of the Underworld will not let Jintai do anything to us even if it is for his own sake. Yu Qinshu was surprised. You also want to escape with us? Of course. Deming Luan was angry, pointing and scolding. What does your song have to do with me? You just have to make one request after another to the Celestial Palace. Do you think the Celestial Palace is a place where you can bargain? Isn't it because of the two of them that I fought for you? If you run away, Qintai's face will be lost. How can I have a good ending as a guarantor? What else can I do but run away with you? It is my bad luck to know you. I have to live in fear every day. Chapter 1074. Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng looked at each other. They had known the big bright wheel for so many years, and it was rare to see him lose his composure like this. It was obvious that he was really unhappy, or that he had no confidence in Yu Qinshu's trip to the Immortal Palace. The two looked at the culprit at the same time. Yu Qinshu was also quite embarrassed. The big bright wheel treated him sincerely and helped him everywhere. If he destroyed the big bright wheel's rice bowl and forced him to flee for his life, it would be really unfair to him. He smiled awkwardly. To tell you the truth, I went to the endless horizon of the underworld this time, and the Emperor of the Underworld happened to be there. The Red Armor Army invited me to meet the Emperor of the Underworld. To be honest, the Emperor of the Underworld is quite friendly to me. The others rolled their eyes when they heard this. He made it sound like he was a big shot. Wei Chuanxiu sneered and lamented, "You have to believe it. It is all true. But the key is that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in my hand was accidentally obtained from someone else, not because I am a trusted person of the Emperor of the Underworld." They looked at each other, and Wei Chuanxiu asked in surprise, "In that case, you still dared to take it out to deceive people in Twilight City? Damn it. The army of the Underworld wanted to kill me. I took out the token of the Emperor of the Underworld for the sake of emergency." Yu Qinshu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "In fact, I didn't know it was the token of the Emperor of the Underworld before I took it out. I only knew that it should be of some help. Nobody would dare to take it out to cause trouble if they knew it was the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. In fact, it was because of this that the Emperor of the Underworld asked the Red Armor Army to interrogate me at the Endless Horizon." They were stunned, not expecting such a thing to happen. "That's strange. Where did you get the token of the Emperor of the Underworld?" Wei Chuanxiu looked up and down at the intact Yu Qinshu and said, "Since you met the Emperor of the Underworld, did he just let you go?" "It is because he let me go that I feel strange." Yu Qinshu shrugged at the great bright wheel and said, "There are still many things that I don't understand about this. Do you think I would dare to bring everyone to the Netherworld? What if we fall into a wolf's den right after escaping from the tiger's mouth?" Even though he said this to everyone, in reality, he didn't want to easily escape until the last moment. If he didn't run, he would still have a chance if he worked hard, but if he ran, then all his years of hard work in the immortal world would be wasted, and he would have to start from scratch again. The most important thing was that he still had a way out at the critical moment. Even if he wanted to escape, there was no need for him to take the risk of escaping to the Netherworld. "Then what do you want to do?" Deming Luan asked. Yu Qinshu looked into the distance and said with determination, "Isn't it just going to the Celestial Palace? There was nothing to be afraid of. If it really doesn't work, we can just run together. I've already prepared an escape route for everyone. No one can do anything to us." After his experience in the All Heavens boundary, in terms of mentality, the Celestial Palace could no longer give him too much pressure. When they heard this, they looked at each other. They didn't know whether it was true or not. Deming Luan narrowed his eyes and looked at him for a while, then said in a deep voice, "In that case, I have nothing to say. I'll go back and give some instructions. I'll look for you later." With that, he flew away. Deming Luan went to make preparations. Yu Qinshu, who had just returned and had to rush to the Celestial Palace, naturally had to make some preparations. After having a secret discussion with Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng on the rooftop, he quickly went downstairs and hid in a room. He took out the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld that the great Ming Luan had given him. He held one in each hand and waited for a while. Because the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was too obvious, he put it away. As for the Netherworld Passage token, he didn't stand on ceremony. It might be difficult for others to imitate, but it wasn't difficult for him at all. He used Jinju to make dozens of tokens in one go as templates so that he could imitate it when needed. After doing this, he quickly gathered the lords of the various countries to meet in the conference room on the 21st floor. In the end, he found that everyone couldn't resist the temptation in the end. They used elixirs and the Immortal Ascension Passage to forcibly raise their cultivation to the early stage of Small Immortal. In this regard, Yu Qianqiu expressed his understanding. Because a small number of them had already reached the end of their lifespans. Since they couldn't be sure that they would succeed naturally, they could only take a shortcut. When the others saw the cultivation of the people around them skyrocketing, they couldn't remain indifferent. They gritted their teeth and followed suit. After everyone communicated, Yu Qianqiu carefully observed everyone's mental state. He was afraid that everyone would lose control of their emotions if they were cooped up here for too long. Some people would want to leave or go back. However, he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. After thinking about it carefully, he felt relieved. Think about it, a mere few years was really nothing to cultivators. Moreover, the illusory immortal city had cultivation resources that everyone couldn't compare to in the mortal world. As long as it was something that everyone needed for cultivation, the World Chamber of Commerce had never been stingy with everyone. What Yu Qianqiu didn't know, and most importantly, was that the longer everyone stayed in the illusory immortal city, the more they understood how dangerous the outside world was, and the more they understood how tiny they were. Even though they were overlords of an area in the mortal world, in the immortal dimension that was filled with sects like trees in a forest, any ordinary expert from any sect would be able to easily deal with them. With their cultivations, it was impossible for them to stand out in the immortal dimension. Therefore, whether it was in terms of cultivation resources or safety, having the World Chamber of Commerce protect them in the illusory immortal city was really the best. Whether it was the barrenness of the mortal world or the dangers of the outside world, they temporarily didn't consider it. Currently, they had Yu Qianqiu who could provide them with resources. If they didn't make good use of it, they wouldn't be the rulers of the various countries they used to be. When he returned to the rooftop, the great bright wheel was already waiting for him. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he took out the token of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld. When the great bright wheel received it, it was silent for a moment before it said, "It seems that these things didn't help you much in the underworld. Because the token of the underworld emperor is more useful than them." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu, who were at the side, seemed to be sending him off. Wei Chuanxiu looked around and didn't see any movement from the women. She asked thoughtfully, "You're not sure if you'll be lucky or not, aren't you going to say goodbye to them before you leave?" "I've been wandering outside all year round and haven't had time to accompany them. I've already let them down. I'd rather have them complain about me and think that I'm a womanizer than have them worry about me. I can only hope that I can create a future for them with no regrets." Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a wry smile before summoning a flying shuttle and taking the lead to fly into it. The great bright wheel followed closely behind. A stream of light flew far away from the rooftop of the World Chamber of Commerce. It blended into the streams of light that rose and fell in the illusory immortal city and disappeared. The disciples of the various sects who had been secretly watching the World Chamber of Commerce also quietly disappeared. On a day when the sky was filled with rosy clouds, Yu Qianqiu flew towards the main peak of the blissful immortal realm for the first time. There was a majestic palace shining brightly amidst the misty clouds. The two landed in a world made of gold. Relying on a token that shone with golden light, the great bright wheel brought him into the righteous heaven gate, which was guarded by two golden-robed guards. Yu Qianqiu followed behind the great bright wheel and stared dumbfoundedly at the incomparably wide and majestic golden plaza in front of him. The ground was paved with large golden tiles. There were golden pillars, golden towers, golden arched bridges, golden railings, and other things at regular intervals. In addition to the majestic palace that shone with golden light in the distance, this was clearly a golden kingdom, a golden world. Walking in this golden world, the ground was like a glossy yellow mirror that could clearly reflect the people walking on it. Each golden pillar that brushed past was several times thicker than a person, and each golden tile on the ground was several times wider than a bed. Looking around in such a grand atmosphere, it made one feel so insignificant, like an ant climbing on a mountain of gold. This was Jin Tai's immortal palace. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly speechless. If he didn't know that Jin Tai was a gold spirit, just the aura of the immortal palace in front of him would have frightened him. The two walked for more than an hour before arriving at the bottom of a golden flight of steps that increased in height by 100 meters. At the top of the flight of steps was the huge immortal palace that shone with golden light. It made one look up at the mountain and added a sense of oppression. On both sides of the flight of steps, there were halberd-wielding guards at regular intervals. The strict atmosphere was used to guide people. The great bright wheel suddenly raised its hand and the two stopped at the bottom of the flight of steps. On the way here, the great bright wheel had told Yu Qianzhou that normal people were not allowed to use spells to fly within the immortal palace. They could only walk. Yu Qianzhou looked at the flight of steps and was speechless. What kind of rule was this? They had already walked for more than half an hour. Adding on the flight of steps that were hundreds of meters high, wouldn't it be a waste of other people's time? Just as he was thinking, he saw a person who violated the rules. Instead of walking, she directly flashed down from the flight of steps and landed on the lowest step in front of the two of them. The person who came was wearing a golden robe. Not only did she look old, she was actually an old lady with wrinkled skin and white hair. Her eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as she looked at Yu Qianzhou, causing Yu Qianzhou's heart to jump. Someone who could brazenly violate the rules of the immortal palace was naturally not an ordinary person. Yu Qianzhou was muttering the identity of the person who came. The great bright wheel had already secretly warned him. This person is the chief steward of the immortal palace. Her name is Nie Shaoqian. If you don't make things clear, would I dare to take the risk? Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth. He was too lazy to argue with Deming Luan. He waved his hand and interrupted, "Stop talking nonsense. This isn't a place for you to behave atrociously. Quickly follow me. Don't let the head chief wait for too long." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou relaxed. Thus, the two of them quickly flew away from this place. After flying out of the Golden World, the two of them headed straight for a mountain peak not far away. On the peak of the mountain, there was a huge ancient palace made of pure wood. On the small square outside the palace, Qing Yang, who looked indistinct and serious, glanced at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Come with me." Yu Qianzhou cautiously glanced at the great bright wheel. When he saw the great bright wheel nod, he quickly followed behind Qing Yang. Deming Luan followed behind head chief steward Nie, who knew that Qing Yang, who was at the front, would suddenly turn around and say, "The two of you don't follow us. Especially you, head chief steward. The atmosphere of my green pear palace doesn't match your arrogant manner." After she finished speaking, she turned around and continued to walk into the palace. Following behind her, Yu Qianzhou secretly clicked his tongue. He didn't know what kind of background this woman had. She actually dared to speak to the Golden Emperor's trusted aide, the head chief steward Nie, in such a tone. Stopping, head chief steward Nie had a helpless expression. He turned around to look at Deming Luan and smiled wryly. "My daughter really doesn't give me any face." Yu Qianzhou, who had just stepped into the palace, pricked up his ears. Deming Luan watched as Yu Qianzhou disappeared into the palace. After a moment of silence, she bluntly said, "Head chief steward, forgive me for speaking bluntly. Our loyalty to the immortal emperor cannot be forced onto the next generation." Once these treasonous words came out, head chief steward Nie's body shook. Her sharp gaze pierced straight into Deming Luan's calm eyes. A murderous aura lingered around her body. After a long time, she slowly retracted it back into her body. She slightly sighed and said, "Perhaps what you said is right. However, this is the only time. I don't want to hear you say such words in my ears again." Then, her tone changed and she coldly said, "I can see that you are very considerate of this Yu Qianzhou. Head chief steward is wise. I have always been loyal to the immortal emperor. The sun and moon can bear witness." Deming Luan slightly bowed towards her. Then she helplessly said, "I won't hide it from head chief steward. I actually don't have much of a relationship with this Yu Qianzhou. The reason why I take care of him is because we were friends in the past. As long as it doesn't harm the immortal palace's interests, please help me a little." Head chief steward Nie's gaze that was full of deep meaning moved away from him. She didn't pursue the matter any further. Instead, she looked at the palace gate of the Green Pear Palace with a sense of loss. Everyone had their own story. Even though she was a high-ranking official, she was no exception. The people outside could not hear any sound from inside the Green Pear Palace. It was clear that there was a soundproof formation inside. About an hour later, Qing Yang's figure flashed out from the palace gate. Deming Luan didn't see Yu Qianzhou. Her eyes couldn't help but slightly narrow as she stared at Qing Yang. "How is it? Is this Yu Qianzhou's item presentable?" Head chief steward Nie helplessly asked. Qingyang's expression was cold. She didn't directly comment on whether Yu Qianqiu's item was good or bad. She only replied without a smile, "Help him make some arrangements. When the time comes, it should be able to satisfy the immortal emperor and immortal empress." Hearing these words, De Mingluan's anxious heart finally relaxed. He knew that since this woman said these words, Yu Qianqiu should be able to pass this hurdle. Head Chief Steward Nye also slightly nodded his head. "Then I'll leave this Yu Qianqiu to you. You must bring out something satisfactory on the day of the wedding." "I have a request," Qingyang coldly said. "I need enough people to accompany the dancers. I also need to create enough instrumental music." The wrinkled Chief Steward Nye didn't hesitate to say, "This is not a problem. I will contact the people in charge of manpower and skilled craftsmen. They will do their best to cooperate with you." After receiving the reply, Qingyang didn't say any polite words of thanks. Instead, she turned around with a cold expression and was about to leave. At this time, a golden-robed guard quickly rushed over and bowed to Chief Steward Nye. Reporting to Chief Steward, "The immortal empress heard that Yu Qianqiu is here and wants to see Yu Qianqiu." Everyone present was startled when they heard this, especially Qingyang. She stopped in her tracks and turned back around, frowning as she looked at Chief Steward Nye. The latter seemed to know that she didn't like people to disturb her work. However, no matter what, Ji Wu was now carrying the title of the Immortal Empress. As long as it wasn't an unreasonable request, it wouldn't be easy to refuse. With a straight face he said, "Since the Immortal Empress wants to see him, Qingyang, quickly tell Yu Qianqiu to come out and see the Immortal Empress at the Crystal Palace." Qingyang coldly replied, "Yes." Her figure flickered as she returned to the palace. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu ran out with a puzzled look on his face. He looked at the great bright wheel with a questioning gaze. It seemed that Qingyang hadn't told him anything. Seeing the confusion on his face, Chief Steward Nye pointed at the guard who came to report and said indifferently, "Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Empress Ji Wu wants to see you. Go with her to see her." After that, quickly return to the Green Pear Palace and continue to listen to her orders. "Do you understand?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Why did that woman Ji Wu want to see him now? Confused, he cupped his fists and replied yes. Then he flew away with the guard. The great bright wheel's eyes also flickered. He didn't know whether it was a good or bad thing for Ji Wu to summon Yu Qianqiu. He frowned and cupped his fists. "Chief Steward, if there is nothing else, I will return to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." Chief Steward Nye nodded and left first. The great bright wheel looked in the direction of the Crystal Palace in the distance, then frowned and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Outside a gate with a tall jade wall, Yu Qianqiu immediately saw the colorful jade palace inside. The guard stopped outside the gate and stretched his hand inside. "Don't let the Immortal Empress wait for too long. Quickly go and see her." "Thank you." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and walked in without any clues on his face. In fact, his mind was spinning quickly. He didn't know if Lu Yanqing and Immortal Crocodile Monarch were here. As soon as he stepped into the palace, he was immediately attracted by a thatched hut not far away. He didn't understand why there was such a strange thatched hut in this place that looked like a crystal palace. The courtyard was empty and desolate, and not a single person could be seen. Just as Yu Qianqiu was wondering why the dignified Immortal Queen's residence did not have a servant, he saw a familiar person walking out of the palace door in front of him. It was none other than Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing looked at him with a complicated expression and was stunned for a moment. Then she bowed and led the way into the hall. "The Immortal Empress is waiting for you inside." Although there was a smile on Yu Qianqiu's face, there was an unconcealable coldness in his eyes. It was hard for him to have a good impression of this woman who made decisions on her own and made him uncomfortable. When he walked along the jade steps to the door of the hall, he smiled with a slightly sarcastic smile and cupped his fists. "Thank you." When Lu Yanqing saw the unforgettable coldness in his eyes, her face couldn't help but turn pale. Her delicate body swayed for a moment, and she turned back and stepped into the hall with her head slightly lowered. After Yu Qianqiu followed her in, he found that the hall was empty. He didn't understand what it meant. He saw Lu Yanqing, who was leading the way, turn into the back hall. He paused for a moment but finally followed her. Who knew that as soon as he stepped into the rear hall, a large hand would grab the collar behind his neck like a sneak attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged while turning his head to look, only to see a black-clothed silver-haired big man laughing loudly at him. "Stinking brat. We finally meet again. Old monster." Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised. Who else could this person be but the immortal crocodile monarch that he had been talking about? Before he landed, he flashed back into the air. The two fellows who had not seen each other for a long time couldn't help but hug each other. Chapter 1076. After pushing each other away, the two of them threw punches at each other, or patted each other's backs. They couldn't help but sigh when they reunited after such a long time. During this time, Yu Qianqiu faintly noticed that the strength of the other party's hands seemed to be a little weaker than before. He remembered that when the other party casually patted him twice, he had to grit his teeth in pain. Now it was just like that. He didn't think too much about it. It was probably because his cultivation had improved. He smiled and looked up and down. Old monster, how have you been these years? Immortal Crocodile's expression stiffened slightly. He pushed him and waved his hand to change the topic. Let's not just talk about ourselves. You and Sister Ji Wu can be considered old acquaintances. Hurry up and say hello. Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw Lu Yanqing accompanying a woman with a noble temperament that was even more beautiful than Yu Qianqiu. Her long white dress slid down the jade stairs behind her like flowing water. Her black eyebrows, eyes, nose and red lips were all shockingly beautiful. This was not the first time he had met this person. If it wasn't immortal monarch Ji Wu, who else could it be? Beautiful. No wonder Jin Dun wanted to marry her. In order to show respect or politeness, Yu Qianqiu stopped his eyes from sliding to the other party's full chest. He smiled bitterly and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets the immortal empress. Ji Wu's beautiful eyes carefully looked at Yu Qianqiu. Although it wasn't the first time she had met Yu Qianqiu had a head full of braids and his skin was bronze. He was dressed like a barbarian. It was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu's original appearance. In the end, she found that it didn't match the elegant and handsome scholar in her mind. She was somewhat disappointed. After a pause, she said faintly, Yu Qianqiu, we meet again. Yu Qianqiu is honored to be able to see you again. Yu Qianqiu's words and actions remained respectful and courteous, but he was actually cursing in his heart. If it wasn't for this woman calling him out, he wouldn't have been tossed here to do such a disgusting thing. Ji Wu didn't seem to like the title, Immortal Empress. She frowned a few times. Immortal Crocodile was also a little unhappy. He frowned and waved his hand. All right. Stop pretending to be refined. I know better than anyone what kind of person you are. Little sister Ji Wu spent a lot of effort to bring you here not to listen to your flattery. Do you know why she brought you here? In any case, it was definitely not something good. Yu Qianqiu's expression did not change. I don't know. Immortal Crocodile chuckled coldly and circled around him until Yu Qianqiu's hair stood on end. He clicked his tongue and said, Kid, you're not simple at all. You actually found a way to come to the immortal realm from the human world and set up a sect in the immortal realm. Are you trying to bully others because they don't know your background? Thank you, Immortal Empress and Brother Crocodile, for keeping my secret, Yu Qianqiu said politely, but in his heart he was wondering what this guy was trying to do by beating around the bush. It's good that you know. Immortal Crocodile placed his big hands on Yu Qianqiu's shoulders and said sincerely, then shouldn't you express something? Express something? Yu Qianqiu broke away from his hands and asked warily, express what? Immortal Crocodile glanced at Ji Wu, then turned back and said firmly, I won't hide it from you. Little sister Ji Wu didn't want to agree to this wedding at all. It was Lady Jean who threatened her with my life that forced little sister Ji Wu to agree. The two of us have always wanted to escape, but there are many experts in the Paradise Immortal realm. With our strength we can't escape at all. When we were in the human world, I saw the magic of your teleportation formation, Yu Qianqiu. Please help us this once. Use the teleportation formation to send us back to the human world. How about that? This. Yu Qianqiu secretly glanced at Lu Yanqing and asked secretly, did you tell them the secret of going back and forth to the human world? No. I didn't say a word about this, Lu Yanqing replied quietly. Yu Qianqiu was relieved when he heard this. He smiled bitterly at Immortal Crocodile and said, if you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have come back from the human world. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you now. There's nothing I can do about this. It wasn't that he didn't want to help, but he didn't dare to. He and Ji Wu didn't have any friendship at all. It was not worthwhile to take risks for her. Although he had some friendship with Immortal Crocodile in the human world, it was built on the basis of mutual benefit. Their relationship had not reached the point where they could reveal any secret. Besides, when he came here, Immortal Crocodile's wife disappeared. If he didn't suspect him, who else could he suspect? If his wife was stolen, no man would agree to it. He was afraid that Jintai would dig 3 feet into the ground to find him. Even if he hid in the human world, he might not be safe. In short, saving these 2 people wouldn't do him any good. Instead, it would cause a lot of trouble. He couldn't waste so many years of effort to save them. It was not worth it. Anyway, Jiwoo wasn't his woman. Whoever she married had nothing to do with him. So he could only refuse. The back hall instantly became frighteningly quiet. Immortal Crocodile's face gradually turned sinister. He sneered and said, "I knew you were ruthless and didn't want to cause trouble for the 2 of us. Since you didn't save us first, don't blame me for being rude. You came from the human world during the war, have the divine sword of the demon lord of 10,000 swords, and are also cultivating the Samadhi true fire. There's no need for me to help you keep it a secret." Ji Wu and Lu Yanqing were shocked. They didn't expect Yu Qianshou to have the divine sword of the demon lord of 10,000 swords, and he was also cultivating the Samadhi true fire. "Are you threatening me?" Yu Qianshou's expression turned cold. Being threatened in such an undisguised manner, the thing that had settled in his bones after many years of tempering inadvertently came out again. At this time he ignored the people standing here and just narrowed his eyes and sneered, "Old monster! Be a man with a conscience. If I hadn't saved you too, you would still be trapped in the heaven and earth universe formation. So I don't owe you anything. If I remember correctly, the 2 of you promised not to reveal my secret. I didn't expect you to go back on your word." For him there was no point in pretending now. Whether he saved them or they revealed his secret, the immortal palace would not let him go. In that case, why should he be threatened by them and save them? Either way, his hard work would be ruined. If he went back and started from scratch, he might as well leave the 2 of them to be tortured by Jintai. No one would have an easy time. Immortal Crocodile glared at him and was about to flare up, but Ji Wu reached out and stopped him. Ji Wu looked at Yu Qianshou with surprise. She could see that he wasn't afraid of her at all. She frowned slightly and said, "Yu Qianshou, if you have a way to help us escape, why don't you help us? We will definitely repay you in the future." "Repay you in the future?" Yu Qianshou sneered. "I think it's better not to. Today I have seen what it means to go back on your word. How can I expect you to repay me in the future?" Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, was secretly shocked. She didn't expect that Yu Qianshou wasn't even afraid of an intermediate stage immortal emperor expert. She understood that it wasn't luck that he was able to get to where he was today. Just this courage and spirit alone wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. "You." Immortal Crocodile, who was about to flare up again, was stopped by Ji Wu's brother Crocodile. Ji Wu stared at Yu Qianshou, who was standing expressionlessly. After hesitating for a while, she bit her lip and said slowly, "Yu Qianshou, as long as you save us, I am willing to be your woman." Although her face was still cold, there was already a faint redness under her pink skin. It took a lot of courage to say such words. As soon as she said this, everyone thought they heard wrong. However, she said it word by word, so it was difficult to mishear. In an instant, the entire palace was so quiet that even ants could be heard. "Oh." Yu Qianshou, who was acting like a dog that didn't eat shit, choked. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could fit in it. His domineering and arrogant aura had all gone to hell. His current image was no different from that of a fool. Immortal Crocodile reacted and immediately said anxiously, "This kid and Jintai are not good people. Being his woman is the same as falling out of the tiger's den into the wolf's den. At most we will just die. Sister, why do you have to humiliate yourself like this?" Ji Wu ignored him at this time. She was going all out, but Yu Qianshou did not answer. As a top beauty who had always been high and mighty, it hurt her self-esteem a little. She immediately said with a frosty face, "Yu Qianshou, do you think this is not good enough, or do you think my cultivation and looks are not good enough for you?" Yu Qianshou was stunned by her roar. He didn't understand what she was doing. He smiled bitterly and said, "I am good enough, I am good enough. I'm not good enough for you. I, Yu Qianshou, am not even good enough to carry your shoes? Cut the crap." Ji Wu waved her hand and interrupted him. She was embarrassed and angry. She said sternly, "So you agree? Kid, how dare you?" Immortal Crocodile pointed at Yu Qianshou and shouted angrily, "If you dare to take advantage of me, I will fight you to the death. I say, the 2 of you, please spare me." Yu Qianshou gave in and bowed to the 2 of them. "It's not that I don't want to help the 2 of you, but I really can't do anything. The treasures I set up the teleportation array are used up. The 2 of you must have heard about my master challenging the Emperor of the Underworld and about me going to the Underworld. In fact, I wanted to go to the underworld to find my master and ask for more treasures. Unfortunately, I didn't find my master. Otherwise, how could I not save him? It wasn't that he didn't like beauties, especially a great beauty like Jiwoo, but he was not the kind of person who would lose his mind at the sight of a beautiful woman. No matter how beautiful Jiwoo was to him, she was still an outsider who he didn't know. He would not trade the future of a group of women in his family. Lu Yanqing looked at him in surprise. Jiwoo's beauty made her heart beat faster. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so indifferent. Chapter 1077. The treasure used to set up the teleportation formation? Immortal Lord Crocodile was startled. He calmed down and asked, "Are you talking about the silver balls I saw before?" Yu Qianqiu immediately showed a grateful expression and cupped his hands at him. "Old monster, it's good that you remember. You finally cleared my name. You've seen how to use those things. The more you use, the less you'll get." He turned to Jiwoo and said, "Immortal Empress, please understand. I really can't do anything for the time being. I'm warning you, don't call me Immortal Empress," Jiwoo said through gritted teeth. She had said those embarrassing words without knowing the truth. Now she could only use anger to cover up her embarrassment. Yu Qianqiu had a fawning expression on his face as he repeatedly agreed. As long as this matter could be resolved peacefully, he did not mind suffering a bit of grievance. To him, the true deciding factor was who would have the last laugh, and it was definitely not a momentary face. This was because he had never thought of himself as a gentleman, and he did not mind admitting that he was a vile character. As a result, Jiwoo felt nauseous. The reason why she had said those words before was because she had thought that Yu Qianqiu was a talented scholar from the songs she had heard. It should be known that the more beautiful a woman was, the more they would yearn for a scholar. Subconsciously, she had some admiration, which was why she had said those words without thinking. But now it almost made her vomit. She hated herself for being blind and almost giving herself to a sycophant. Thus, her pretty face turned pale from anger, and she wished she could slap herself twice. She even wanted to skin Yu Qianqiu alive. Immortal Crocodile exclaimed in surprise. "I checked those small silver balls back then, and I didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Can't I refine more? It would be easy if it were as easy as you say." Yu Qianqiu complained bitterly, "I didn't have to risk my life to run to the netherworld and I almost got killed. Don't think that those silver balls are simple. Only my master knows how to make them. Only my master can make them." "Did you find your master in the netherworld?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head dejectedly. "No." Immortal Lord Crocodile was not surprised by this answer. Based on his understanding, Bai Changchun had been forced into the mysterious Forbidden Land by the Emperor of the Netherworld. Immortal Lord Crocodile continued to ask questions about some suspicious points, including why Yu Qianqiu had the Emperor of the Netherworld's token. However, this was Yu Qianqiu's forte. He easily dealt with it. In the end, Immortal Lord Crocodile was no longer angry. To be honest, Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, was also a woman and a great beauty. In fact, she was very sympathetic towards Jiwoo's experience. She did not understand why Yu Qianqiu was unwilling to help them when he could easily travel back and forth between the human world and there were peerless beauties throwing themselves into his arms. Then she remembered that she was also a beautiful woman and had thrown herself at him, but he had not accepted her either. She could not help but feel bitter. After experiencing so many things, she could reflect on some things. Maybe Yu Qianqiu had his reasons for doing this. It had been proven that Yu Qianqiu's decisions were often unreasonable at first, but they were often right in the end, unlike her, who always brought trouble to others. "Get him out." Jiwoo, whose face was as cold as ice, suddenly said. Although she didn't mention any names, everyone knew that she was asking someone to get out of here. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu and sighed. "We had high hopes for you, but if we had known, we would not have dragged you into this. Go." "Where should I go?" Yu Qianqiu spread his hands in an aggrieved manner and said, "If you leak my secret, the Immortal Palace will definitely not let me off. Since I'm going to die either way, I won't bother running around. I'll just leave it to fate." How could he leave so casually in fear? His words were a roundabout way of sounding out what was going on. Immortal Lord Crocodile glared at him. "We are not as bad as you think. Go. We will not drag you down with us." This time Yu Qianqiu was relieved. He immediately patted his chest and promised. "Old monster. Don't worry, as long as I am alive, I will find a way to save you and the Immortal Empress. Just you wait." Immortal Lord Crocodile's teeth hurt. She had already become the Immortal Empress. What was done was done. Why would she need you to save her? You were just looking for excitement. He stole a glance at his sister, Ji Wu. Sure enough, Ji Wu gritted her teeth, pointed her finger at Yu Qianqiu and yelled, "Get out of here!" Yu Qianqiu did not mind her bossy attitude at all. He nodded and bowed as he walked out. "Then I will not disturb you anymore. If you need anything, you can send someone to Green Pear Palace to find me at any time." Ji Wu was so angry that she turned her head to the side. She regretted what she had said before. She would rather not see this despicable person. Even if she was beaten to death, she would never let him see her ugly face again. Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, secretly sighed. Combined with the fact that Yu Qianqiu was not afraid of Ji Wu's words and actions, and then seeing Yu Qianqiu's fawning look and the back view of him being scolded to leave, she actually felt a burst of sadness for no reason, and almost shed tears. In an instant, it was as if she had taken a miraculous elixir. She vaguely understood some things. In fact, with this man's ability to come and go freely, there was no need for him to humiliate himself like this. At worst, he could just leave. However, as the supreme being of the human world, while enjoying the glory, he also worked hard to fulfill his duty. In order to stop the killing in the human world, he brought everyone to the immortal world to work hard. He shouldered the future and hope of too many people in the human world. Everyone only saw the glorious side of him in front of them, but they did not know the heartache of him being humiliated behind his back. Perhaps what she was thinking was exactly what Yu Qianqiu was subconsciously forcing himself to do. However, Yu Qianqiu was black-hearted and thick-skinned. He had long been invulnerable to such things. As long as he could take advantage of it, everything else was a piece of cake. You humiliate yourself, I'll do my own. Let's see who has the last laugh. After exiting the Crystal Palace, Yu Qianqiu was brought back to the Green Pear Palace. He walked alone to the entrance of the main hall. Just as he stretched his foot over the threshold, he quickly retracted it. He was afraid that someone would be angry at his impoliteness. Fortunately, Qingyang's voice came from inside, "Come in." Only then did he tidy his clothes and walk in. However, once he stepped in, time passed day by day, but he never came out again. No one knew what he was doing inside. It was another morning filled with rosy clouds. On the peak of the Passion Mound, the highest peak of the Passionless Palace, there was another rainbow. Wang Qing, who was the closest to the rainbow, sat cross-legged on the edge of the cliff. He received the rosy clouds in the morning and bathed in the starlight at night. He sat there motionlessly for a few days and nights. As the morning sun rose, coinciding with the angle of light refraction, a rare and magnificent tear stain appeared on the silver mask that covered his face. It gave off a sorrowful feeling, as if the flower had splashed its tears and the bird had left its heart. In the eye sockets of the mask, the eyes that had not been opened for a few days and nights slowly opened. Looking around, one suddenly found that today's rosy clouds were unprecedentedly magnificent and majestic. Is this to send me off? Wang Qing let out a sigh and slowly stood up. He turned around smoothly and walked towards the giant sword that was inserted in the middle of the mountain peak. He stopped when he was about 10 feet away from it. The snow-blue giant sword gradually emitted a magnificent snow-blue light that flowed endlessly on the sword. It seemed to have felt something and let out a soft, ing-ing sound, which was hoarse and heart-stirring, lasting for a long time. A gust of wind blew, the blue robe fluttered, and the long black hair behind the mask intertwined and danced. The giant sword suddenly burst out a breathtaking snow-blue brilliance, like a bright pearl between heaven and earth. It complemented Wang Qing, who was standing 10 feet away. The momentum faintly showed the tendency of man and sword becoming one. You and I are connected. I know that you want to show your brilliance, but do you know why I have not pulled you out? Because you and I want to accumulate the strongest sword intent. Once we use it, we must be invincible. The giant sword seemed to understand Wang Qing's words. The huge sword body trembled faintly, and the soft sound also became high-pitched. The wide blue robe on Wang Qing's body suddenly rolled against the wind. A sharp aura burst out from the edge of the robe and drew an arc on the ground of the mountain peak. The soil and stones on the ground were blown away by the wind. With the giant sword as the center, a circular deep mark with a radius of 10 feet appeared around it. Wang Qing touched the snow-blue ring on his left index finger, and then his left hand formed a claw on the giant sword. The top of the mountain trembled, and a cylindrical rock with a diameter of 6 meters and a depth of more than 10 meters slowly pulled out the six-dragon snow-blue sword. After the whole mountain rock was completely pulled out of the top of the mountain with the giant sword, the snow-blue ring on Wang Qing's index finger that was condensed into a claw shot out a blue light. It directly swallowed the whole mountain rock together with the giant sword and disappeared. Wang Qing brazenly put the large rock and the giant sword into the storage ring. His intention was very obvious. He still did not want to pull out the sword until that moment. He wanted to brew the strongest sword intent when he pulled out the sword. The round pit that had just appeared on the top of the mountain was under his feet. He was not in the mood to look at it. He just wanted to see what could attract his attention at this moment. He slowly turned around and turned around. The wide blue robe wrapped around his tall and thin body was deformed and tossed in the wind. His long hair sometimes blew straight back, and sometimes it was blown messily by the wind on his shoulders. The pair of eyes under the silver mask showed a rare tenderness. She looked around at the sea of clouds, the rising sun, and the rainbow that traversed the peak of the mountain. It was as if she wanted to take in all of these and keep them in her memory forever. However, in the sea of clouds in front of him, a sweet-tempered woman from his memories surged out and smiled at him. Suddenly, an innocent child came out of the sea of clouds and ran around the woman. In the end, the child hugged the legs of the sweet-tempered woman and asked, "Mother, where is father?" "Over there." The gentle woman raised her hand and pointed at Wang Qing at the top of the mountain. The child immediately turned around and looked at her and laughed. The morning glow was filled with the laughter of an innocent child. The eyes in the holes of the silver mask slowly closed. Tears seeped out from the closed eyes and a murmur came from under the mask. "I was wrong. Royan, wait for me to come back." A stream of light suddenly shot from the top of the mountain to the sky. The strong airflow directly opened a cloud path in the sea of clouds and went far away. Chapter 1078. Immortal World, Paradise Immortal Realm, Green Pear Palace. There were tens of thousands of mountains in the Paradise Immortal Realm, and there were also tens of thousands of buildings that were large or exquisite. However, there were not many places like the Green Pear Palace, which was as cold as autumn. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as tranquil and serene. It did not have the kind of hostility that was full of intrigue or killing. At least this Green Pear Palace, which was shrouded in clouds and mist, looked so quiet and peaceful on the surface. However, this was only on the surface. The liveliness inside was incomparable to any other place in the entire fairyland of bliss. In the center of the Green Pear Palace, there was a large palace room. Under the moss-covered eaves, the old wooden door was tightly shut. Standing outside the wooden door, one could not hear any movement inside, but as soon as one entered the room, one would be attracted by the dancing and singing inside. In this huge palace room, the floor was polished to the point that it could reflect one's reflection. Countless singers were holding various musical instruments and singing, and a large number of dancers were showing their graceful figures. They were separated by a soundproof enchantment and did not disturb each other. However, all the soundproof enchantment in the palace room was removed today because they had to fully cooperate with the main person personally chosen by the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress. Under the training of Palace Master Green Pear Palace, they had to cooperate with the main person again and again, but the main person was really stupid. Often, one action would cause everyone to keep repeating, "Damn it, I don't want to play anymore." A sad and indignant voice sounded in the palace room again. Yu Qianqiu collapsed on the ground and lay motionless on the smooth green jade floor like a puddle of mud. When he first arrived here, his interest was piqued by the number of beauties and handsome men here. Due to his unattractive appearance, he felt a sense of accomplishment, like a crane standing in a flock of chickens. It should be said that a chicken stands in a flock of cranes. Imagine a chicken being surrounded by a flock of cranes. How great a sense of accomplishment would that chicken feel? But after being repeatedly trained by Green Pear Palace Master Qingyang for a few days, he felt like dying. Thus, he sadly realized that the free-range chicken was still the same free-range chicken. It was impossible for it to be prettier than a flock of red-crowned cranes. At most, it would be more eye-catching if one of them ran into the flock. "I can barely make do with singing, but you actually want me to dance a classical dance? Choreograph your grandma." Yu Qianqiu lay on the ground half dead. He looked at Qingyang, who was coldly staring at him from the side, and he was about to collapse. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes a few times, tilted his head to the side and said angrily, "Don't look at me, I really can't play this thing, I'm not playing anymore." The drummers and dancers around him stopped, and everyone's eyes fell on him. Qingyang, who was wearing a light veil, looked at the person at her feet coldly and said indifferently, "Don't say such words to me in my Green Pear Palace, no one will stop you from leaving. If you really don't want to do this anymore, you can leave now and we can save ourselves some trouble." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and looked at her, gritting his teeth. He had said similar words many times, but he was no match for her, so he had to obediently accept the training. He could only crawl up and continue as if his bones were broken. In the beginning he was a little afraid of this woman, but after getting along with her for a long time, he realized that this woman was different from the people outside. In the words of his previous life, she was an artist who was obsessed with the art of singing and dancing. She did not care about the messy things outside of Green Pear Palace, and only lived in her own world. Because he understood this, he dared to roll around in this Green Pear Palace. Seeing his listless appearance, Qingyang furrowed her brows. She gestured with her arms and said, "You can't be like this. Your mentality is very important. You have to focus, you have to put your entire being into it." She pointed to the side and said, "You go to the side first, see how we do it and feel it with your heart." Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Then he ran to the side and sat under a huge brown wooden pillar. The pillar was engraved with the words "green pears in the wilting wilting." He sat on the 2 steps of green jade and looked at the group of professionals. He sighed in his heart. That Jin Taizong really lived the life of an emperor, and he even had a professional royal song and dance troupe to entertain him. As expected of a rich and powerful life. Qingyang clapped her hands, making a crisp sound, and then made a beautiful hand gesture. The singers and dancers quickly changed their formation, and the heart-stirring chords formed by several musical instruments sounded, and the atmosphere in the palace suddenly became relaxed and carefree. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled, and he felt that this tune was very familiar. The group of dancers all had charming smiles on their faces as they danced around Qingyang. Their unbridled joy were clear to see. Qingyang's unsmiling face melted like an ancient iceberg, and her dance was very simple. She wandered around the group of dancers and it seemed like she was dancing, but it didn't seem like she was dancing. It was as if she was free and unfettered in the world of mortals. Seeing this, Yu Qianqiu was stunned and he only wanted to praise her. How fast she changed her expression and how professional she was. Following the change of the tune, the men rolled to Qingyang's feet and began to form a formation. Qingyang leisurely stepped on the backs of the men and sat on the back of one of them. Her bare, slender, jade-like feet stepped on the back of another man. She rested her elbows on her knees and supported her cheeks with her palms. She tilted her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. Then she pretended to take an imaginary wine glass from a female dancer and tossed it around. She giggled and gently tapped her feet on the back of the male dancer. Her toes curved in a seductive arc, and she appeared to be very carefree. She gently laughed and began to sing the song that Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with. "The world of mortals is so funny, infatuation is the most boring. No matter how cold the wind is, I don't want to escape, no matter how beautiful the flowers are, I don't want them, let me float. Cry today, laugh tomorrow, I don't ask for anyone to understand, I'm full of pride. The song is singing, the dance is dancing, the night is long, and the dawn is looking for happiness." Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he was immersed in the song, unable to extricate himself from it. After the song was finished, the music stopped and the dancers left the stage. Qingyang returned to her expressionless face and she walked over and asked, "What do you think after my arrangement?" Yu Qianqiu slowly came back to his senses. Sitting there, he looked at her and shook his head in amazement. After she added the harmony of other instruments to the monotonous music he had originally made, the song "Laughing at the World of Mortals" was performed incisively and vividly by her. After hearing and seeing it, people could fully feel the carefree feeling of laughing at the world of mortals. What was a professional? The person in front of him was a true professional, and the essence of the song was completely revealed. It was difficult for people not to be immersed in it. "How do you know this song?" Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. "I heard it from the maid beside Ji Wu. It is said that she was originally your subordinate. I heard her sing a few of your songs and they are indeed unique. However, the one I like the most is still the one I just heard. This song contains the state of mind that I have always wanted to pursue, laughing at the world of mortals." Qingyang said lightly, "If I didn't really like you and wanted to see you, do you think I would bring an outsider to the Green Pear Palace?" "I see." Yu Qianqiu helplessly scratched his forehead. Needless to say, the person beside Ji Wu was undoubtedly Lu Yanqing. Qingyang looked at him and suddenly frowned. She shook her head in confusion and said, "After interacting with you for a few days, I really can't believe that a person with a mind like yours could compose a song like this. It is completely different from your words and actions. Music is the voice of the heart. I deeply suspect that this is not your doing. How could you possibly compose a song like this? However, I have never heard a similar song from the famous songs that the Immortal Palace has collected from the three realms, so I have no evidence to prove my suspicions. Yu Qianqiu looked at her speechlessly. What was a professional? An expert would know once they made their move. Her eyes could immediately tell that these songs were not composed by him. He wanted to honestly admit it, but when he thought about the fact that he was riding on a tiger and couldn't back down, it would be no different from deliberately lying to Jin Tai. Thus, he decided not to admit it even if he was beaten to death. However, Qingyang's tone suddenly changed. She sighed and said, "However, when I was in the Green Pear Palace and saw your new song with my own ears, I understood that this song was clearly created by you after you received the Immortal Emperor's decree. You flattered and flattered the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress. It should not have been plagiarized from someone else. Only then did I believe that there are people called geniuses in this world. It is my honor to be able to dance with you." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He scratched his face and said awkwardly, "It's not as exaggerated as you say, right? It should be my honor." He couldn't understand why women liked this kind of whining thing. If it wasn't for the fact that he saw Bai Sujin moaning in that cave and that he wanted to get close to a beautiful woman, who would have thought that he would make this kind of thing? He didn't think that this kind of thing would be so popular here. From this, it could be seen how lacking the spiritual and cultural life of this world was. The effect of this kind of thing was probably greatly reduced in his previous life. You don't need to be modest. Good is good, but there are also bad points. Even though you are a genius, you are not able to make good use of it. I can see that your foundation in this area is very poor and you are completely relying on your innate talent. Qingyang suddenly paused and her expression became serious. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a serious tone, "Actually, with your talent in this area, it is a waste to be the sect leader of the world commerce. If you are willing, after the Immortal Emperor's wedding, I can ask for you to join the Immortal Palace as the Vice Palace Lord of the Green Pear Palace. I guarantee that the cultivation resources you will obtain will not be less than what you would obtain by fighting outside. How about it?" Chapter 1079. Yu Qianqiu was completely dumbfounded. In his heart, he lamented that the ancients did not deceive him. As expected, as long as one had a skill, one would not be afraid of traveling the world. However, he knew his own capabilities the best. What kind of *T talent did he have? It was enough for him to fool around. If he dared to take it seriously, he would be courting death. Moreover, he had never planned to become an actress. He was afraid that he would be caught in the unspoken rules. Thus, he waved his hand and said, no need, you don't have to reject me so early. Think about it carefully before you give me an answer," Qingyang said seriously. "There's really no need." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand again to reject her. He leaned against the pillar behind him and smiled bitterly, "Your evaluation is too high. I really don't have the talent that you said. Moreover, to be honest, I don't like this line of work at all. If I'm not interested in something, how can I do well in the future? I appreciate your kindness." At this point, what else could Qingyang say? She wasn't the kind of person who liked to force others. She could only shake her head and sigh in regret. After silently looking at Yu Qianqiu for a while, she suddenly raised her hand and untied the light gauze on her upper body. Under the dumbfounded gaze of Yu Qianqiu, she took off her upper body. The light gauze fell to the ground, and only a green undergarment was left on her upper body. Her pair of white and tender arms were long and slender. Her shoulders and collarbones were moving up and down gently. That slender and soft waist that belonged to a dancer was glowing with a healthy luster. It was a different kind of charm. *CK. Can't be. Yu Qianqiu's eyes almost popped out. He was completely speechless. He thought to himself, you don't have to use dirty tricks just because you think I have talent. You don't have to use dirty tricks to get me into your line of work. Although I like it, I will definitely reject it. Qingyang, on the other hand, had a calm expression on her face. She approached Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting motionlessly. She stretched out her slender and beautiful arm and made an inviting gesture. Inviting me to do this in front of everyone's eyes. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and found that everyone's expression seemed to be very used to it. The muscles on his face couldn't help but violently tremble. He immediately determined that this Green Pear Palace was a den of lust. He awkwardly smiled and refused, I really appreciate your kindness, but I don't have the habit of doing that in front of everyone's eyes. Forget it. The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he could consider it when there was no one behind him. Qingyang immediately knew that he misunderstood. She glared at him and said, What you said. Actually, when teaching a layman like you to dance, the less clothes you wear, the better. This way it will be easier to see if the lines of your body are natural and soft when you dance, and you can correct your mistakes or stiff postures in time, speeding up the progress of your practice. Qingyang. Yu Qianqiu said, then why? Qingyang was speechless. She explained helplessly, don't worry. I don't want to take advantage of you. When a man and a woman dance together, it is easier to reach the realm of body and mind. If it weren't for the fact that I don't have much time left, I wouldn't practice with him like this. Really? Yu Qianqiu still didn't believe it. Qingyang, who had always been serious, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Look at his timid and reserved appearance. Why did it seem like she wanted to do something to him? Do I look so scary? She bit her lips and glared at him. Of course it's true. I am a woman, but I am not afraid. You are a man. What are you afraid of? Yu Qianqiu looked at the expressions of the people around him. He felt that what she said was true. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, I am not afraid. I am just not used to it and feel shy. You? Qingyang was annoyed and amused. She stretched out her hand again and made an inviting gesture. Hurry up. I don't have time to waste with you. Okay. Then I won't be polite. Yu Qianqiu laughed and grabbed her hand. He stood up. Because he was sitting on the ground, he let go of her hand and patted the dust off his butt. Such an action that seemed like that of an old farmer in the mortal world caused Qingyang's brows to furrow. To an extraordinary dancer like her, she really wasn't interested in such vulgar behavior. Moreover, she was going to have to dance with such a vulgar person. She forcefully suppressed her displeasure and reached out to take off Yu Qianqiu's clothes. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He crossed his arms to protect his chest. However, he quickly reacted and said awkwardly, I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself. Thus, under Qingyang's angry gaze, he finally took off his shirt, leaving behind only a tight-fitting white undershirt. After that, he remained indifferent. Take off your clothes, Qingyang said sternly. Yu Qianqiu looked at his own body. He looked at her half-naked upper body and the undershirt. He couldn't help but mutter, you are not even going to take off your clothes. Why do you want me to take off my clothes? You. Qingyang was exasperated, but the professionalism displayed by her subsequent actions caused Yu Qianqiu to panic. She turned her hand and was about to pull the knot of her doo-doo. She was really going to strip naked and start working. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a beast. He let out a breath of cold air and quickly reached out to grab her hand. He repeatedly apologized, my mouth is cheap. I was wrong. If you really took off all your clothes, I would definitely let my imagination run wild and I wouldn't be able to practice well. That's good. Don't be angry, I'll take it off. A hand swiftly tore off the white inner shirt on his upper body with a C sound. Due to his frequent practice of the animal dance, his muscles were not as strong as a bullfrog's. However, they were solid pieces of muscle. It was obvious that he was full of explosive power. The most peculiar part was his skin. After taking off his clothes, his skin had a faint and beautiful luster. It was as if there was some kind of colorful light flowing around his body. It was a very healthy skin color. He didn't know why. However, ever since he started practicing the 5 elemental secret arts, his skin would look better with every element stored in his body. Moreover, his skin would become smoother and smoother. All the beauties who had slept with him were envious. Qingyang's gaze fell on his naked upper body. She couldn't help but stare blankly. She had seen many naked dancers, but she had never seen such healthy skin. Well, it would be more appropriate to say that it looked good. She only lost her mind for a moment. She quickly regained her composure with her professionalism. She turned around and made a hand gesture. A majestic and gentle music immediately started playing. Yu Qianqiu, who had already taken off his shirt, timidly followed behind her. Qingyang suddenly turned around gracefully, her face already filled with an expression of incomparable adoration. She looked at him tenderly, and her jade-like arms stretched out, taking the initiative to hug his neck. This was a serious skin-to-skin contact. The two of them shivered. Yu Qianqiu was not used to this kind of skin-to-skin contact in front of so many people. However, he didn't say anything about it behind their backs. Qingyang, on the other hand, experienced smooth skin for the first time. It was much smoother than her own skin. Hold my waist tightly. Don't touch me. Turn your head towards me. Look at me. Lower your chin a little. Lower it a little more. Don't let your eyes wander. Look into my eyes and look more affectionate. Under Qingyang's careful guidance, Yu Qianqiu was like a block of wood. His hands and feet were big and loose. Not only was he hugging her tightly, but once he loosened his grip, it was like he was throwing something. It was truly a tragic sight to see him throw Qingyang away. Although the people around them didn't see anything on the surface, they all secretly shook their heads. Could this block of wood really be used during the Celestial Emperor's wedding? They were very doubtful. It wasn't just them who were actively preparing for the day of the wedding. In the past month, the Immortal Palace had already sent invitations to all the sects in the Celestial Realm, big and small, inviting them to the Paradise of Bliss to participate in Jin Tai and Ji Wu's wedding. The entire Celestial Realm experienced a rare period of peace in this month. No matter which sect wanted to cause trouble for another sect, even the small sects that couldn't protect themselves, they would brazenly use the invitations sent by the Immortal Palace to repel their enemies. If you dare to hit me, then you're stopping me from participating in the Celestial Emperor's wedding. You're going against the Celestial Emperor. For a time, there were almost no fights between sects in the Celestial Realm. It could be said that this was a rare occurrence. Although everyone knew that it was because of the Immortal Palace's reputation, some people felt strange. Why was it like the calm before the storm? In the blink of an eye, the date of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was approaching. All the sects were preparing to depart for the Paradise of Bliss. The sects that were far away or those with lower cultivation levels and speed had already set off early. No one dared to be careless about this matter. In order to show their respect to the Celestial Emperor, almost all the sects and merchant guilds in the Celestial Realm decided to have their sect masters personally lead people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. Such a grand wedding celebration with such a huge influence could be said to be unprecedentedly grand. The entire Celestial Realm was paying close attention to it. In fact, the influence of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was not only in the Celestial Realm. In the underworld, some people or forces that had friendly relations with the Celestial Emperor or the Immortal Palace had sent people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. For a time, the entrance to the underworld and the underworld was unprecedentedly lively. Looking at the people from the underworld holding the underworld passage tokens issued by the Immortal Palace, and the people coming out of the underworld one after another, the guards of the Immortal Palace who were stationed here sighed in their hearts. They sighed that the influence of the Celestial Emperor was indeed extraordinary. It could be seen that even the people of the underworld were stirred up. Because of this, the army of the Dark Underworld also sent a large number of troops to strengthen the defense at the exit of the underworld to prevent people from taking advantage of the opportunity to cause trouble. Just as the army of the Dark Underworld was strictly inspecting the people passing through the two worlds, a white light suddenly appeared in the sky. Its speed was extremely fast, and in a flash, it landed on the ancient inscription tablet that was engraved with 20 large bright red words not far from the exit of the underworld. Everyone was shocked. Whether it was the army of the Dark Underworld guarding this place or the passers-by, they all looked up. They didn't know who was so bold as to act so recklessly at the entrance of the army of the Dark Underworld. It would have been fine if they didn't look, but after seeing the appearance of the person who came, almost everyone was shocked. They saw a man dressed in a white scholarly robe standing at the edge of the ancient inscription tablet with his hands behind his back. He looked at the people entering and exiting the underworld with an indifferent expression. Chapter 1080. In reality, not many people knew who this person was. It could be said that most people didn't know who this person was. They didn't even know what his name was. However, this didn't prevent them from knowing who this person was. That legendary image immediately reminded them of who this person was. Someone in the Dark Nether army that was guarding this place gave an order. Then they all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Emperor of the Underworld." The surrounding people also knelt down and shouted. However, some only bowed slightly to show respect. The scene immediately became a scene of one person being the ruler. "Rise." A clear voice echoed through the air. When everyone stood up, they only saw a white light shoot into the passageway to the underworld. The white-robed scholar on the tablet had already disappeared. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, then stared at the exit of the underworld in astonishment. At the exit of the underworld on the other side of the immortal world, the white-robed scholar floated out barefoot. There was not a speck of dust under his feet. Standing on the steps of the entrance, he felt the piercing sunlight. He used his hand to block it and slightly raised his head to look at the bright sun in the sky. One of the golden-robed guards on both sides couldn't stand the scholar's careless and arrogant attitude. He immediately shouted angrily, "Someone show your token." The scholar tilted his head and glanced at him indifferently. Then he turned into a streak of light and disappeared. The guard who spoke was furious. He was about to send a signal for his men to kill the scholar, but he was stopped by a few of his colleagues. One of them hissed and waved his hand. "You don't want to live anymore. Do you know who he is? He is the supreme ruler of the underworld, the emperor of the underworld." The angry guard was stunned on the spot. Then a look of relief appeared on his face. If he really angered the emperor of the underworld, even if the emperor of the underworld killed him in front of everyone, he would have died in vain. Even the immortal emperor wouldn't be able to get justice for him. The majestic myriad saints' peak pierced through the clouds, and at the peak of the peak, a group of people walked out from the majestic myriad saints' palace, whispering to each other. When they came out, they turned into streaks of light and disappeared in all directions. These people were the upper echelons of Wangu Tong. After everyone left, Wan Ling sneakily sneaked out from behind a stone pillar and ran into the main hall. In the end, she bumped into the Wangu Tong sect master, Wan Bushing, who had put on a healthy complexion, striding out in large strides. "Unruly girl, why are you in such a hurry?" Wan Bushing glared at her. Wan Ling's eyes lit up as she asked, "Grandpa, where are you going? Aren't you asking the obvious?" "Of course I'm going to Paradise Wonderland." Wan Bushing was slightly startled as he said this. He looked at her with vigilance and asked, "Why are you asking this?" However, just as he expected, Wan Ling hugged his arm and cheered, "I'll go with Grandpa." "Stop fooling around. The people attending this banquet are probably the sect leaders of the various sects in the immortal world. What are you doing there? There's nothing for you to play with there. What are you doing?" Wan Bushing waved her hand away and shouted, "Go do what you should be doing." "Grandpa, let me explain." Wan Ling anxiously grabbed his arm again and spilled out the reason. "This time I made a bet with Hidden Dragon Manor's Duke Long Yu's granddaughter, Long Xiaojiu. Whoever can't attend the immortal emperor's wedding has to be the other party's maid for a month. Grandpa, can you bear to see Ling Heir lose the bet and suffer such humiliation? What's the difference between me and Grandpa being humiliated and Wangu Tong being humiliated? Moreover, the invitation didn't limit the number of people attending the banquet, so what's wrong with bringing one more person? Can't you just treat it as bringing Ling Heir to broaden her horizons? This is an unprecedented grand wedding of the immortal emperor Ah. If you miss it, there won't be a next time." "You." Wan Bushing stared at her speechlessly. After a long while, he finally yelled, "Nonsense." At this time, the entire immortal world was in an uproar. Not only did Wangu Tong sect master, Wan Bushing, personally come to the immortal emperor's wedding, more than 10,000 sect masters of various sects had prepared their gifts and left their sects, heading towards the immortal realm of bliss from all directions. Even the 12 immortal monarchs under the immortal emperor's command in the 12 immortal prefectures all came to attend the banquet. In the immortal world, no matter where they were, when they saw the light streaking across the sky towards the immortal realm of bliss, they would all sigh and speculate that it must be the people going to attend the banquet. The immortal emperor's wedding. This was definitely an unprecedented grand banquet in the immortal world. The immortal realm of bliss had become the focus of the entire immortal world, causing countless people to exclaim in admiration. In the ghost world, more than 10 immortal cultivators hurried across the sky together. Suddenly, a green light streaked across the night sky, chasing after a group of people. Startled, the group of people hurriedly stood back to back in the sky, ready for battle. The green light stopped in front of everyone, and a green-robed old man with a thin face appeared. He glanced at the group of people indifferently and asked directly, "Where is the exit from the ghost world to the immortal world?" The group of people looked at each other and found that no one could see through this person's cultivation. They were all a little surprised. The person in the lead, who was probably the leader of the group, respectfully cupped his hands towards the green-robed old man and said, "Judging from your appearance, you are not from the ghost world, so you should also be a cultivator from the immortal world. Since you can come to the ghost world from the immortal world, why don't you know the way back? And judging from your cultivation, you are definitely not a nobody in the immortal world. May I ask which sect in the immortal world are you an expert from?" The green-robed old man glanced at him and said slowly, "This old man is Bai Changchun. From the human world." "From the human world? Bai Changchun?" The person in the lead was stunned and didn't understand what it meant for a moment. But someone beside him was shocked, and he quickly looked up and down at Bai Changchun's appearance. He suddenly exclaimed, "You are the Bai Changchun who challenged the Emperor of the Netherworld?" As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes immediately swept over Bai Changchun, and they found that his appearance was indeed very similar to the Bai Changchun in the rumors. Immediately, all of them were shocked to the point that they couldn't speak. This wasn't a topic that Bai Changchun wanted to talk about at all, so he asked again, "This old man wants to go to the immortal world. Who can show this old man the way?" His tone was already slightly impatient. Everyone was shocked. This madman was famous in the ghost world. He dared to fight the Emperor of the Netherworld, so it was naturally not difficult for him to deal with them. The person in the lead immediately pointed in the direction of his group and said, "Go straight in that direction, and you will see the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld. Once you go out, you will be in the immortal world." But he pretended to look up and down at Bai Changchun. But what? Bai Changchun's cold gaze pressed over like lightning. The person in the lead cupped his hands and said, "Even though the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld is there, it is heavily guarded now. If you don't have a passage token to the netherworld, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to go out. Of course, with your cultivation, it's naturally not a problem to go out by force. But if you alarm a large number of experts from the netherworld or the Emperor of the netherworld, I presume that's something that you don't want to see happen. Not to mention without a passage token to the netherworld, even if you leave the netherworld, it will be troublesome at the exit of the immortal world. What if you make a commotion and cause the experts of both the immortal world and the netherworld too?" He revealed a smile that was filled with deep meaning, and he seemed to be saying that you ought to know what the consequences would be. The people around him looked at him with slight puzzlement, and they didn't know why he was so long-winded. How good would it be to send this person away as soon as possible? There was no need to cause more trouble. "Oh." Bai Changchun dragged out an "oh," and then he looked ahead and said indifferently, "So what?" That person immediately took out a black token and offered it up with both hands in a fawning manner. "I've long heard of your great name and I've always admired you. To be able to see your true appearance today is truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. I have an extra passage token to the netherworld here, and I'm willing to give it to you for free to help you leave the netherworld smoothly to express my admiration for you." With such an action, the people around him were even more confused. Wasn't he deliberately causing trouble for himself? Immediately, someone secretly sent a voice transmission to warn him, "Elder, this person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army. Once your actions are leaked, it will bring great trouble to the sect. Please reconsider. You better learn from me." That person quickly replied with a voice transmission, "It's precisely because this person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army that we accidentally exposed his identity. Aren't you afraid that he will kill us to silence us? Think about it, even the 4 great Netherworld generals together aren't a match for him. What can we do to him? This is called showing goodwill on purpose to make him lower his guard. After he leaves, haha. Have you forgotten the huge bounty and great benefits offered by the Dark Netherworld Army?" The former immediately came to a sudden realization and secretly flattered, "Elder is indeed wise. Not only can you avert danger, but you can also take advantage of the situation to make a fortune. When you return to the sect, it will definitely be a great merit. Truly brilliant. This junior has learned his lesson. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Bai Changchun raised his hand and took the netherworld passage token from the other party's hand. He held it and looked at it repeatedly. Then he raised his eyebrows and stared at that person, saying indifferently, "Just based on you guys, I wouldn't bother to make a fuss about it. But since you're unaccountably solicitous, you must be hiding evil intentions. Looks like I can't let you guys live." Ah. Everyone was shocked. As long as they weren't fools, they would be able to understand what he meant. That person who was solicitous turned pale with fright and said, What do you want to do? How can you repay kindness with enmity?" However, seeing that Bai Changchun's expression was completely unmoved, he immediately panicked and shouted, "Stop him!" Then he turned around and wanted to run. A sonorous cold snort rang out. Everyone immediately felt a majestic and enormous pressure pressing down on them from all directions, suppressing them to the point that they couldn't move at all. Bai Changchun didn't want to waste any more time with them. Chapter 1081. Tomorrow is the wedding day of the immortal emperor. The entire immortal world is celebrating. I wonder what kind of grand occasion the paradise immortal realm will be. Unfortunately, with our cultivation, we are not qualified to attend the banquet. We can only look forward to it. The closer they got to the exit between the underworld and the immortal world, the more envious words they heard. Bai Changchun, who was flying past these people, frowned and muttered to himself, Tomorrow, a meditation cultivator wearing a large red shawl suddenly felt something rushing at him at high speed. Just as he reacted, he felt a strong gust of wind, causing him to spin several times in the air. When he calmed down, he found that the shawl he was wearing had disappeared. It was obvious that it had been snatched by someone passing by. This meditation cultivator was about to shout who dared to snatch his things, but after seeing the flash of light, he immediately shut his mouth. Judging from the speed of the other party, he could tell that the other party's cultivation was far higher than his. If he really called the other party back, he was afraid that at that time, it would not only be snatching the shawl but also taking his life. However, what made him scratch his head was that his shawl was just an ordinary shawl. Why would such an expert want to snatch such an inconspicuous thing? It didn't matter if he couldn't figure it out. Bai Changchun, who was flying at high speed, suddenly unfolded the blood-red shawl in his hand against the wind. With a hua sound, it shook and like a red cloud, he rushed over and wrapped it around his shoulders to cover his green robe. He directly flashed towards the heavily guarded exit of the underworld below. Two groups of people were verifying the pass tokens at the exit of the underworld in front of him. After Bai Changchun landed, he glanced at the people in front of him and took out the pass token that had been verified. After confirming that it was the same as the one in his hand, he looked straight ahead and walked over with large strides. In fact, with his ability, the guarding dark underworld army in front of him could not stop him at all, but he was not the kind of person who was inflexible to the point of not knowing how to adapt. It was an urgent matter. Knowing that tomorrow was the day of Queen Jin's wedding, it would take some time to get to the Immortal Palace. He didn't want to be entangled by trivial matters on the way, so he dressed up like this. Otherwise, he would have disdained to dress like this. The first two groups of people entered the swirling black light in the cave one after another and disappeared. A heavily armored general of the Onyx army stood in the middle of the road and stared at Bai Changchun with an awe-inspiring aura. In the end, he discovered that he could not see through this person's cultivation at all, so he immediately retracted his aura a little. Just as he was about to ask the other party to show him the Netherworld token, a black light flashed out from the gap of the person's blood-red cape, and a Netherworld token floated in front of him. The general was slightly taken aback by Bai Changchun's arrogant behavior under the heavy pressure of the army of the dark underworld. He looked at Bai Changchun meaningfully, grabbed the token and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he returned the token and made way for Bai Changchun. He even extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. Throughout the whole process, Bai Changchun did not need to shout at ordinary people. However, Bai Changchun did not appreciate his kindness. He had already brushed past him and did not even look at him from the beginning to the end. He flashed into the swirling black light in the cave ahead. A red cloud floated out of the fairy realm's exit. After checking the token, Bai Changchun stared at the group of people who had just left and chased after them. In the pure paradise fairyland, inside the crystal palace of the Empress of Immortals, the three people in the courtyard looked at the immortal palace that was looming in the clouds. Does it really have to be like this? Ishuejuan asked dejectedly, his head lowered with a depressed look. Lu Yanqing was silent on the side. Brother Yi, you don't have to persuade me anymore. We have no choice. Ji Wu stared angrily at the immortal palace in the sky, gritted her teeth and said, Isn't it just marrying her? He can have my body but not my heart. Ishuejuan shook his head in grief and indignation. How stupid is that? Lu Yanqing's expression was touched when she heard the words. Her lips moved slightly and she stopped for a while. However, she seemed to think of something again. She suppressed the impulse to speak and silently lowered her head and bit her lips. Stupid. Ji Wu sneered and said, One day I will make Jin Tai regret his stupid decision today. What he forced on me and what he did to Brother Yi, I will make him pay double. With the identity of the immortal empress, I can actually do a lot of things. You. Ishuejuan's words stopped at the tip of his tongue. A ray of light shot out from the immortal palace and landed outside the crystal palace. Nie Shaoqian, the chief of internal affairs of the immortal palace, led 8 golden-robed maids in. They then stood in a row and saluted Ji Wu in unison. Greetings, immortal empress. Ji Wu snorted coldly. How dare Chief Nie come in person? Are you here to urge me or force me? Nie Shaoqian smiled and said, It was this old servant's negligence. Those 2 insensible servants have been dealt with by me, and the immortal emperor has also reprimanded this old servant. She bowed and said, This old servant welcomes the immortal empress to the immortal palace. What's the hurry? It hasn't started yet, right? Ji Wu turned sideways. The immortal palace had already sent 2 maids to invite her, but she sent them back. Nie Xiaoqian smiled apologetically and said, "When the immortal empress arrives at the immortal palace, the guards outside the paradise fairyland will let in the sect leaders who came to congratulate. Moreover, the immortal emperor has ordered that the immortal empress will be the mother of the world, so we must dress up well for the immortal empress. So, please don't make things difficult for me. I can go too." "Could it be that the 2 slaves didn't tell you what I said?" Ji Wu asked without turning her head around. Nie Xiaoqian looked at Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing. She smiled and saluted again. "The immortal emperor has reprimanded me, saying that it is normal for the immortal empress to have 2 trusted people around her." She looked at Yi Xuejuan meaningfully and said, "But I have something inappropriate to say. The immortal empress also knows the immortal emperor's temper. I am afraid that someone around you will do something inappropriate to annoy the immortal emperor and implicate the immortal empress." The meaning of these words was obvious. There was no doubt that it was a warning to some people not to cause trouble at the immortal emperor's wedding celebration. This time they were facing the world. Whoever made the immortal emperor lose face in public would not only be themselves, but Ji Wu would also be unlucky. Yi Xuejuan was furious. "Old woman, yeah, what do you mean?" Ji Wu turned around and stared at Nie Xiaoqian, asking, "Are you threatening me?" "I dare not." Nie Xiaoqian bowed slightly and turned her head to the people behind her. "Escort the immortal empress and her trusted followers to the immortal palace." Her tone was firm. The 8 maids immediately rushed forward. Ji Wu shouted angrily, "Get out of my way. I can walk by myself." Nie Xiaoqian's eyes turned cold as she flew towards the immortal palace in the sky. She glanced at Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing, who were trembling with fear. She waved her hand and said, "Take them away." She then chased after Ji Wu. Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing were immediately restrained by the 8 maids and forced to return to the immortal palace. In the wilderness outside the mountains of Paradise Wonderland, there were many people. The leaders of various sects in the immortal realm had gathered here. They had been waiting for a long time. Seeing that the 12 immortal monarchs had swaggered in, but no one was allowed to enter after a long time, some people were slightly unhappy, but they dared not express their anger. The group of people who were qualified to stand in the front row were naturally the leaders of the big sects in the immortal realm. The Heartless Palace's sect master, Wang Qing, who was dressed in a blue robe and had long, unrestrained hair, was wearing a silver mask. He naturally stood in the front row with his hands folded over his abdomen. He stood there as straight as a pencil without saying a word. The leader of Wan Gu Tong, Wan Bo Sheng, who sat at the top of the Chamber of Commerce, stood on the left of Wang Qing. Behind him was Wan Ling, who appeared at the wrong time. On the left of Wan Bo Sheng was the leader of the Hidden Dragon Manor, Long Sheng, who sat at the second position in the Chamber of Commerce. Behind him was a woman who appeared at the wrong time, Long Xiaojiu. Thus the 2 rivals in love stood side by side. It was rare that Long Xiaojiu did not attack each other. It took Long Xiaojiu more effort to come this time than Wan Ling. If Long Sheng did not know that this girl's bet implicated the face of the Hidden Dragon Manor, he would not have brought her. However, the price Long Xiaojiu had to pay was heavy. After the bet, she would be detained and reflect on her mistakes for 10 years. However, Long Xiaojiu naturally would not tell Wan Ling about this embarrassing matter. At this moment, the 2 girls were squeezed in the middle of a group of experts and were as obedient as 2 little quails. However, they could not help but secretly size up the mysterious man in the silver mask in the front row. The 2 girls had heard of this extremely cruel and terrifying person who killed his wife and son, but they could not help but want to see his true face under the mask. Dang! A clear and melodious sound of a bell reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. A rainbow bridge that was 100 meters wide hung directly in front of everyone from afar. It was extremely magical. Countless golden-robed guards flew over in a densely packed manner. One after another, they stood on both sides of the rainbow bridge. Every 100 meters, there would be a pair of guards facing each other. A golden flowing light quickly flew over along the rainbow bridge. Wu Xiong appeared at the head of the bridge and laughed heartily. He cupped his hands and said, "Please forgive me for neglecting you esteemed guests. On behalf of the Immortal Palace, I respectfully welcome the esteemed guests outside the mountain gate. Everyone please follow along the rainbow bridge. Inside we have already prepared bejeweled wine for you. Please." He made a welcoming gesture and then flashed to the side to greet them with cupped fists. Wang Qing was the first to turn into a stream of light and fly along the rainbow bridge. The people behind him followed one after another. However, the people behind him seemed to be much more polite than Wang Qing. When they passed by Wuxiong, they would slightly slow down and return the greeting with cupped fists. Only then did they quickly follow the rainbow bridge into the distance. The golden-robed guards on both sides of the rainbow bridge all made a welcoming gesture with cupped fists and stood there motionlessly. After the rainbow bridge went deep into the paradise immortal realm, it suddenly split from the center. Chapter 1082. In the middle of the two rainbow bridges, a line of golden characters appeared, indicating that the sects in the top 1,000 in the immortal world would be seated in the immortal palace in the sky, while the sects below the 1,000 would be seated below. When the sect leaders of the various sects arrived here, they immediately knew who was better and who was worse. Most of them couldn't help but look up at the majestic immortal palace in the distance and felt a little regretful. After all, there weren't many outsiders who could see the true appearance of the immortal palace. If they missed this opportunity, they were afraid that there wouldn't be another chance in the future. However, there were some things that they couldn't control. On the contrary, those sects that were barely ranked in the top 1,000 were a little surprised. In the past, in some occasions the ranking was often ranked in the top 50 or 100, at most within the top 200. They didn't expect that even these sects that were ranked in the top 1,000 would have the opportunity to enter the immortal palace. From this, it could be seen that the immortal palace was preparing for a grand wedding celebration. For them to be able to see the true appearance of the immortal palace was also an honor. After going back, they would have the capital to brag about it, so it wouldn't be considered as a wasted trip. However, for the sect leaders of the top sects, many of them had been summoned by the immortal emperor at the immortal palace. Although it was called a summon, it was actually a disguised form of submission. For these proud and arrogant people, the immortal palace represented a period of shame in their lives. Being able to sit in the immortal palace was nothing to be happy about. At the entrance of the Golden World and the Rainbow Bridge, the Grand Commander of the immortal palace, He Lai, personally stood on the side to welcome the guests. On the other side there was a marked place for guests to receive gifts. There was a row of guards helping the immortal emperor to receive the wedding gifts. In the distance, there was a magnificent immortal palace that was glistening with multicolored light, as well as this dazzling and magnificent golden kingdom. This caused those sect leaders who had just arrived to be extremely shocked. Perhaps the sects didn't lack such worldly things like gold, but it was impossible for them to take out so much gold. What was called grandeur? This was the true grandeur of an emperor. Anything that was accumulated to the extreme was enough to shake people's hearts. Under the lead of the immortal palace's guards, the group walked for almost an hour before they reached the bottom of the steps of the majestic immortal palace. Most of them were shocked by the immortal palace's silent sovereign king's aura. From the bottom to the top of the 36th step, there were 6 sets of 12 long golden tables on each side. The tables were already filled with fine wine and delicacies. At the center of the 36th step, there were 2 extremely luxurious dragon and phoenix thrones, and the delicacies on the table were even more sumptuous. The 12 seats below were naturally prepared for the 12 great immortal monarchs. As for the 2 dragon and phoenix thrones in the middle, who would dare to sit on them except for Jin Tai and Ji Wu? On both sides of the stairs, 10 long rows of golden tables were set up. There were a total of 20 rows on both sides, and each row had 50 seats, exactly 1,000 seats. In the middle there was a 100-meter wide aisle in the air. Under the guidance of the guards of the immortal palace, they began to take their seats according to the ranking of their sections. The sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, sat on the first seat on the left side of the steps, while Wan Bushing sat on the first seat opposite of Wang Qing. Long Sheng of the Hidden Dragon Villa was right next to Wan Bushing. At this time, nearly 1,000 people couldn't help but look at Wan Bushing and Long Sheng because the two of them were too conspicuous. Everyone came alone, but the two of them brought a girl. Moreover, it was the pair of clowns who were notorious for fighting for a man's affections in the immortal world. Why did it feel like they were making a scene? Some people who had a good relationship with the two of them secretly sent messages to them, admiring them. You two old guys really have guts. The faces of the Xing and the Xing were slightly dark, and they happened to be leaning against each other, so it was impossible for them not to be conspicuous. Even Wang Qing, who was sitting opposite of them, couldn't help but look at the two old guys. In fact, they did not expect that the immortal palace would have such a clear seating arrangement. They had thought that it would be fine to let the two juniors mingle with the crowd of tens of thousands of sects to attend the banquet. Who would have thought that when they arrived in front of the immortal palace, there would be more than 9,000 sects divided according to their sects. And the remaining 1,000 people were assigned one position for each sect. Now there would be something to see. The two old guys were full of regret. If they had known this earlier, they would have asked Wu Xiong when they were outside the Paradise Immortal Realm. After knowing the situation, they would immediately ask the two girls to leave. Now it was hard to get off the tiger. Fortunately, the Immortal Palace was not stingy. The length of the long golden table was enough to accommodate two people, and the guards of the Immortal Palace didn't express any doubts about the two extra girls. However, the two girls were cramped and didn't dare to raise their heads. Under the pressure of the Immortal Palace, they realized how small they were and that they had caused trouble. Their intestines were green with regret. The two girls' ears were filled with the angry voices of the two sect leaders who had nowhere to vent their anger. Their heads were so low that they almost hit the table. In the magnificent imperial garden of the Immortal Palace, a white-robed scholar strolled barefoot with his hands clasped behind his back on a small path in the garden. He looked at the garden that was filled with all kinds of flowers, trees, and pavilions that were carved out of gold. Everywhere was golden and dazzling. As he wandered, he saw Jean Tai, who was walking from the front palace to the back palace. He immediately walked to the middle of the road and blocked Jean Tai's way. Jean Tai's slender eyes shone brightly and he said in a deep voice, "I'm warning you, don't make trouble at this time. I'm here to congratulate you on your wedding. Why would I come to make trouble?" Bai Qi said with a smile and reached out to touch the golden robe embroidered with dragons and clouds. Jean Tai unceremoniously waved his hand to block the other's demonic claws and said coldly, "Are you so kind? Have I been blind for so many years? It's more likely that the sun has risen in the underworld. You don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. If you don't believe me, I can't do anything. All right?" Bai Qi waved his hand and pointed at everything around him that was shining with gold and said, "Other people's imperial garden is full of exotic flowers and plants. You have nothing but gold here. I'm giving you face by saying you're vulgar. Will your bride be able to endure your perverted fetish? Jiwu, that girl is a rare beauty in the world. Aren't you afraid that you'll ruin her on your golden bed? Bai Qi, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Get out of my way." Jean Tai shouted in a deep voice. Bai Qi chuckled and got out of the way. After watching Jean Tai's figure disappear into the harem, he crossed his arms and mumbled to himself with an annoyed expression. That boy with a messy fate was chosen by Jean Tai to sing. In the vast golden square below the Immortal Palace, countless golden-robed guards suddenly appeared from all directions. They lined up neatly and stood there motionlessly, almost filling the entire square. It gave the sect leaders of the various sects a great deal of pressure, as if they were surrounded. Just as the heads of the various sects were looking around, a burst of heavenly music suddenly rang out in the entire square, stirring everyone's hearts. A group of men and women wearing light muslin or with vigorous bodies landed on the 100-meter-wide passageway in the middle. As soon as they landed, they immediately danced to the fluttering heavenly music, displaying their enchanting dance postures. It was very pleasing to the eye, and the atmosphere of the entire square immediately relaxed. Suddenly, everyone raised their heads to look at the 100-meter-high steps. They saw that the mighty 12 immortal monarchs had split into two rows and walked down from the high steps. When they were stationed in one area, they all wore different clothes, but now they all wore the golden woven clothes of the Immortal Palace. The 12 immortal monarchs walked down step by step, directly facing the crowd below and sat down in their seats. Then a large group of golden-robed men appeared on the top of the 100-meter-high steps. As the two groups of people split into two groups and walked down the steps in an orderly manner, the sect leaders of the various sects immediately gasped. These people were the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains in the pure paradise immortal realm. There were over 3,000 of them, and the weakest of them was at the early immortal emperor realm. They all listened to the orders of the immortal emperor, and they were the central force of the immortal palace that truly deterred the entire immortal realm. For example, the positions of the 12 immortal monarchs and immortal palace commanders and protectors were mostly vacant, and most of them were selected from among these people. In just a short while, more than 3,000 experts had separated along the stairs and stood on both sides of the stairs. The sect leaders below all felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by these people. However, before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. The 24 protectors of the immortal palace were split into two rows, each with 12 people walking down the steps. Finally, they stood on both sides of the steps that corresponded to the number of steps. That was not all. At the top of the steps, 6 people stood side by side. After a short pause, they walked down in unison. These 6 people were the 6 great commanders of the Immortal Palace. Wu Xiong and De Ming Luan, who led the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, were among them. The 6 of them walked until they were 18 steps away from the 12 immortal monarchs and stopped. Everyone looked at the top of the steps again. The figure of Nie Shaoqian, the chief steward of internal affairs of the Immortal Palace, stood alone. After glancing down coldly, she said in a clear voice, "The Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress have arrived." Her voice resounded through the entire Immortal Palace. The 12 immortal monarchs on the 36th step suddenly stood up and turned around. The 6 great commanders on the 48th step turned around. The 24 protectors on both sides of the steps turned around. The more than 3,000 palace lords of the Paradise of Bliss on each side of the 36th step turned around. Countless immortal palace guards all over the square turned around. Everyone looked at the chief steward of internal affairs, Nie Shaoqian, who was on the steps. Under such an imposing manner, thousands of sect leaders stood up subconsciously. Wang Qing, who was in the seat of honor, paused for a moment but still stood up. At the center of everyone's attention, a man and a woman in dragon and phoenix golden robes appeared on the left and right of the chief steward of internal affairs. They looked down with incomparable dignity. Nie Shaoqian did not dare to stand side by side with the 2 of them. She walked down 3 steps in a row. After lowering her head, she glanced at the people below and said, "Welcome, Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.